I stood in front of the Victorian-style house I'd grown up in, its familiar blue shutters and wraparound porch bathed in the warm glow of sunset. The property had seen better days, paint peeling at the corners, a few loose shingles, garden overgrown, but it still held that timeless charm that had first captured my heart decades ago. Funny how things work out. A month ago, I'd secretly purchased this house through my investment company. Now, I was here for what my mother called an important family dinner. The certified letter from her lawyer that arrived yesterday gave me a pretty good idea what to expect. I adjusted my blazer, smoothed down my skirt, and walked up the creaking steps. Through the front window, I could see them already gathered in the dining room: Mom, my younger sister Emily, and Emily's husband Mark. The perfect family picture, almost. The door opened before I could knock. "Catherine," Mom's voice was bright, practiced. "You made it." "Traffic was light," I said, stepping into the foyer. The familiar scent of lemon polish and Mom's signature pot roast wrapped around me like an old sweater. Emily barely looked up from her phone. "Hey, Cat." Mark at least stood to greet me, though his smile seemed strained. He knew what was coming too. I could see it in the way he kept glancing at the thick envelope on the sideboard. "Wine," Mom offered, already pouring without waiting for my response. Always the perfect hostess, even when preparing to drop a bomb. I accepted the glass but didn't drink. Instead, I watched her flutter around the dining room, adjusting plates that didn't need adjusting, straightening silverware that was already perfect. Classic displacement activity. She was nervous. "So," she finally said, taking her seat at the head of the table, "I suppose you're wondering why I called this dinner." Emily set down her phone. "Mom, we know. The lawyer called." Of course he did. Emily had always been kept in the loop, while I got my information through certified mail. Mom's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the envelope. "I've been thinking about this for a long time. About the future. About family legacy." I took a small sip of wine, letting the familiar scene play out. How many times had I sat at this table, listening to Mom praise Emily's potential while my own achievements were treated as expected, just part of being the responsible one. "As you know," Mom continued, "your father left everything to me when he passed. The house, the savings, his investments." She paused, fingers tracing the envelope's edge. "I've decided it's time to put my own affairs in order. Here it comes. Everything goes to Emily." The words hung in the air like smoke. Emily's face lit up with practiced surprise, while Mark's shoulders relaxed visibly. They'd known, of course, probably helped plan it. "The house, the accounts, everything," Mom continued. "Catherine, you understand, don't you? You're so successful already. And Emily, well, she needs more security." I set down my wine glass carefully. "Everything goes to Emily," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "Including the house?" "Yes, of course." Mom's tone held that familiar note of dismissal. "You have your own place in the city. Emily's always loved this house. Loved it so much she hasn't helped maintain it in 15 years, I said quietly. Emily's head snapped up. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I reached into my bag, "that someone had to do something before this place fell apart completely." I placed the property deed on the table, fresh ink, dated exactly 1 month ago. "What is this?" Mom's voice sharpened. "Property records," I said, sliding them closer to her. "You see, when the bank called about foreclosure, which they did 3 times, I realized something had to be done. So I bought the house, paid off the mortgage you'd taken out without telling anyone, fixed the property taxes you'd fallen behind on." The color drained from her face. "That's impossible. The house isn't for sale?" It was. The bank was quite clear about that. Funny how no one mentioned it to me directly. I had to find out through my real estate monitoring service. Emily grabbed the papers, eyes scanning frantically. "This has to be a mistake. Mom would never Never what, Emily? Never keep secrets? Never make financial decisions without consulting the family?" I leaned back, finally taking a proper sip of wine. "Like she never told you about the second mortgage, or the credit cards, or the investment scheme that ate up half of Dad's insurance money?" Mark's face had gone pale. "What investment scheme?" "Oh, you didn't know about that either?" "Last year, Mom got involved with some guaranteed return program, lost nearly $200,000 before I found out and shut it down. That was private." Mom's voice cracked like a whip. "Was it? Like the property taxes were private? The overdue utilities I've been quietly paying for 3 years?" Emily stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. "You're lying. Mom would have told me. Would she? When have you ever paid attention to anything beyond your next project?" Your next big break that always needs just a little more funding? Girls, please. Mom's hands were shaking harder now. This isn't how I wanted dash. How you wanted what, Mom? To tell everyone how you're giving Emily a house you don't own anymore? To play favorite one last time? That's not fair. Emily's face had gone red. You've always been the successful one, the responsible one. You don't need anything. I stood slowly, smoothing my skirt again. You're right. I don't need anything. I never did. I worked for everything I have. But this house? This was Dad's legacy, and I wasn't about to let it be lost because no one else was paying attention. So what now? Mark's voice was quiet, practical. At least someone was thinking clearly. You're going to throw us out? No. I picked up my wine glass, finished it in one smooth motion. The house stays exactly as it is. You all keep living here, just like before. Only now, the bills will be paid on time, the repairs will be done properly, and maybe, just maybe, you'll start appreciating what it means to actually take care of something instead of just expecting it to be handed to you. Mom's face had crumpled. Catherine, please dash. Save it. I gathered my things, tucked the property papers back into my bag. I have a meeting early tomorrow. You all enjoy your dinner. Oh, and Emily? The property tax bill is due next month, but don't worry, I've already scheduled the payment. I walked out of that dining room head high, heels clicking against the hardwood floors Dad had installed himself 20 years ago. Behind me, I could hear Emily's angry voice, Mom's softer protests, Mark's attempted mediation. But I didn't look back. The next morning, my assistant Claire buzzed my office. Your mother's called 4 times. Take messages. And your sister's in the lobby. I glanced at my watch, 9:15 a.m. How long has she been there? Since we opened at 8. She seems determined. I sighed. Give me 5 minutes, then send her up. I used those 5 minutes to center myself, to remember why I'd done what I did. It wasn't about revenge or power. It was about protection of the house, of Dad's memory, of the family's stability whether they understood it or not. Emily burst in like a storm, all flying hair and righteous indignation. You had no right. I had every right. I didn't stand from my desk. The house was going into foreclosure. Someone had to do something. You could have told us, warned us, like Mom warned me about the investment scheme, or the second mortgage, or any of the other financial disasters I've quietly fixed over the years. She paced my office like a caged animal. It's not the same thing. No? Then tell me, Emily, how much is the property tax? When was the last time the roof was inspected? What's the interest rate on Mom's credit cards? She stopped pacing. That's not my responsibility. No, it's been mine. 4 years. Every crisis, every shortfall, every temporary loan that never got repaid. I folded my hands on my desk. Did you know Mom hasn't made a mortgage payment in 8 months? That stopped her cold. What? 8 months. The bank called me, not her. Not you. Me, because somehow I'm listed as the emergency contact. They were planning to start foreclosure proceedings this month. But she never said. Of course not. Just like she never told you about the investment scheme that nearly wiped out Dad's insurance money. Just like she never mentioned the credit cards she maxed out funding your art gallery that lasted 3 months. Emily sank into one of my visitor chairs. I paid her back for that. Did you? All of it? Because the statements I saw showed otherwise. She stared at her hands. I meant to. Things got complicated. Things always get complicated with you, Emily. That's why Mom protects you, cushions you, hands you everything while expecting me to handle the real world. That's not fair. I've worked hard dash. At what? Your photography career that never took off? The gallery that failed? The lifestyle blog that lost money? Meanwhile, I built this company from nothing, created actual success, but that never mattered because you were the creative one, the one who needed support. Tears welled in her eyes. You think I don't know how much I've failed? How many times I've disappointed everyone? This isn't about your failures, Emily. It's about responsibility, about facing reality instead of waiting for the next rescue. So you bought the house to teach us a lesson? I bought the house to save it. The lesson is up to you. She wiped her eyes, smearing expensive mascara. What are you going to do? Charge us rent? Nothing changes. You all keep living there. I keep paying the bills, just like I have been. Only now it's official instead of secret. Why? If you're so tired of supporting us, why not just let it go? I stood, walked to the window overlooking the city I'd helped build, because that house is the last piece of Dad we have, because he worked his whole life to give us a home, and I won't let it be lost because Mom can't say no to you and you can't say no to yourself. The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of unspoken truths. I never knew, she finally said, about the mortgage, the investment thing. I never knew. You never asked. I turned back to face her. You never had to. Someone else was always handling it. You were always handling it. Yes. She stood slowly, smoothing her designer dress, probably another credit card purchase. I should go, Moms, she's not handling this well. She'll adapt, she always does. At the door, Emily paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, not just about the house, about everything. I know. After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, looking at the family photo I kept in the bottom drawer, Dad standing proud in front of the house, Mom beaming, Emily and me on either side. We looked happy, maybe we were. My phone buzzed, Mom again. This time, I picked up. Catherine? Her voice was small, uncertain. We need to talk. Yes, we do, but not about the house, that's done. I know, I found the bank notices, in Dad's old study. I should have told you. You should have told everyone, should have asked for help before it got this far. A long pause. I was ashamed. After that investment thing, I thought I could fix it myself. Some things can't be fixed alone, Mom, that's why family is supposed to work together. Like you did, buying the house in secret? I did what needed to be done, just like always. She sighed heavily. Your father would be proud of you. Would he? Or would he be disappointed that it came to this? Another pause. Both, maybe. He always said you were the strong one. Strong doesn't mean unlimited, Mom. I can't keep being the family safety net. I know. We'll do better. Emily's talking about getting a real job. Mark's looking at financial counseling. Good, because from now on, everything's documented. Every bill, every payment, every decision about the house. No more secrets. Understood. She took a shaky breath. Catherine, thank you for not letting us lose it. I did it for Dad, and for us, all of us. After hanging up, I pulled out the property deed again. Such a simple document to carry so much weight, but maybe that's what it took, something concrete, undeniable, to finally break through years of patterns. The next few weeks were a study in adjustment. Emily got a job at a local magazine, not her dream career, but steady work with actual pay. Mark started taking online courses in financial management. Mom was trying. I kept my word about documentation. Every bill, every repair cost, every decision about the house was recorded and shared. No more financial shadows to hide in. One Sunday afternoon, about a month after the dinner revelation, I stopped by the house to check on some roof repairs. Found Emily in the garden, actually weeding instead of just talking about her plans for an artistic landscape. Need help? I offered. She looked up, squinting against the sun. You know how to garden? Who do you think maintained this place while you were finding yourself in Europe? She sat back on her heels. There's a lot I don't know about you, isn't there? There's a lot you never asked. She pulled off her gardening gloves, new ones. Not the expensive designer ones she'd bought for her brief urban farming phase. I'm asking now. We spent the afternoon working side by side, pulling weeds, trimming bushes, rebuilding the flower beds Dad had loved so much. I taught her the names of plants, showed her how to tell weeds from wildflowers, explained the importance of proper mulching. You know what's weird? She said as we finished up. This is the first time I've felt like I'm actually taking care of something instead of just playing at it. That's what growing up feels like. She threw a clump of grass at me, says the one who was born grown up. Not born, chosen. She sobered. Yeah, I'm starting to understand that. Mom called us in for dinner, actually cooked by her, not delivered or prepared by the housekeeper she could no longer afford. We sat at the same table where everything had exploded a month ago, but the atmosphere was different. I've been going through Dad's study, Mom said as she passed the potatoes, found all the original house papers, the improvements he planned, the maintenance schedules. I have copies, I said, been following them for years. Of course you have, she smiled slightly. He showed you, didn't he? All the things he never bothered to show me because you had Emily to focus on. Emily looked up sharply, but there was understanding in her eyes now instead of defensiveness. I'm sorry, Mom said quietly, for not seeing, for not acknowledging. I know. I reached for the rolls, the ones she'd actually baked herself, slightly lopsided but trying. But from now on, we all see everything. Deal? Deal, Emily said firmly. Mom nodded. Deal. Later, walking around the property in the growing dusk, I found myself on the back porch, Dad's favorite spot. He used to sit out here in the evenings, planning improvements, dreaming about the house's future. I got it, Dad, I whispered to the gathering shadows. It's safe now, we all are. A month later, I received 3 envelopes at my office. The first was from Emily, a copy of her first real paycheck, along with a detailed budget she'd worked out with Mark. At the bottom, she'd written, "Teaching me about the garden wasn't just about plants, was it?" The second was from Mom, bank statements showing she'd closed all but one credit card, along with a receipt for her first session with a financial advisor. Her note read, "Your father kept everything, every receipt, every bill, every record, now I understand why." The third was from the bank, confirmation that all the house's paperwork was fully transferred to my name, everything clear and official, no more shadows, no more secrets. I pinned all 3 to my office wall, right next to the property deed, reminders that sometimes the hardest thing to protect isn't a house or a legacy, but the people you love from their own worst habits. That evening, I drove by the house on my way home. The garden was blooming again, the repairs were holding, and through the windows I could see my family gathered in the kitchen actually cooking together instead of just talking about it. Real change takes time, real growth isn't always pretty, but sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to stand firm, to say the hard truths, to protect what matters even when it hurts. I am that person, always have been. But now, finally, I'm not alone in it. What do you think about Catherine's story? Was she right to buy the house secretly, or should she have warned her family first? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow for more stories about family, responsibility, and the courage to face hard truths.
I am Christina, a 27-year-old woman. I belong to a family of 4, including my mother, my younger sister, and my grandmother. My grandmother has been bedridden for a long time, and my mother has been caring for her almost non-stop, rarely leaving the house. As a result, I have taken on the role of the breadwinner for our family. While my mother dedicates her time to caring for my grandmother, I work multiple jobs to earn a living and cover our household expenses. The days are tough as I balance work and household chores, but without my support, our family wouldn't be able to function. When I return home from work as usual, I see my mother, Sandra, caring for my grandmother. "Mom, you've worked hard today. Welcome back, Christina. You must be tired from work." My mother smiled kindly, but there were deep bags under her eyes. "Mom, are you getting enough sleep?" "Well, I keep watching over Grandma, so it's hard to find the time. But this is my role," she always says with a laugh. She is kind and always devoted to our family. My father passed away when I was 12 years old, and since then, my mother has been raising me and my sister Brittany, who is 10 years younger, all by herself. She worked late into the night to support us, leaving little time to take care of us. Therefore, we were raised with the help of my grandmother, who prepared our meals and took care of us while I also helped take care of Brittany. After graduating from high school, I did not go to college but started working immediately to help with our finances. However, when my grandmother fell ill and needed care, my mother had to quit her job, and our livelihood depended on my income and my grandmother's small pension. My mother often apologized, but I also wanted to do everything I could for my family. My sister Brittany, now a high school student, did not understand the struggles my mother and I faced at all. She didn't work part-time and spent her days hanging out with friends and barely studying. Seeing her like this made me feel complicated. While I started working and managing household duties, and my mother was exhausted from caring for my grandmother, Brittany was immersed in her own world. My mother said, "Brittany's still in high school, so we need to let her enjoy herself," and never spoke harshly to Brittany. Indeed, it is a fun time, but I wished Brittany would grasp our family's situation more realistically. "Mom, are we out of money again? I want to go to a party with my friends." A noisy voice came from the entrance. It was my sister Brittany. Clacking her heels, Brittany entered. "Brittany, didn't I already give you your allowance this month? It's not enough. And Mom, you're always just taking care of Grandma and never paying attention to me." My mother smiled troublingly. "Brittany, I'm sorry, but we don't have much money to spare." Brittany clicked her tongue and slammed her bag down. "Ugh, This is the worst. Why was I born into this family? I twitched my brow at those words. Brittany, have you ever considered how fortunate you are? What? That's easy for you to say, Christina, since you have your own money to spend because you work. If you think so, why don't you earn some money yourself? Brittany glared at me, but soon pulled out her smartphone and began typing something. She just wouldn't listen. My mother continued to spoil Brittany. And as Brittany graduated from high school, she neither worked nor continued her education, instead beginning to lead a life full of outings with friends, seeking a luxurious lifestyle. She said, I love Japan, inspired by a trip she had taken in the past, and would often talk about opening a Japanese restaurant in Hawaii someday. Hey Mom, if I open a restaurant in Hawaii, will you help me? One day, Brittany asked my mother with sparkling eyes. My mother smiled, surprised yet pleased. That would be wonderful. But Brittany, you need money to open a restaurant. It'll be fine. I'll make it work somehow. I sighed involuntarily. Brittany, opening a restaurant isn't as easy as you think. Shouldn't you start by working and gaining some experience? Christina, you really have no dreams, do you? Brittany laughed in disbelief. Dreams, huh? Indeed, I never really had any dreams. All I ever thought about was supporting this family. But Brittany's dreams seemed far too detached from reality. And then, a few days later, an incident occurred. One weekend night, as I was returning home from work, it had become completely dark outside, and only the streetlights dimly lit the path. Suddenly, I checked my smartphone and saw several missed calls from Brittany. I had a bad feeling. Sighing, I called her back, and she answered immediately, Christina. Please, I need your help. Her voice was unusually frantic. In the background, I could hear the murmur of many people. Brittany, what happened? I got into trouble. Please, come pick me up. Again. Brittany had been going out night after night, and her drinking habits were getting worse. Getting into trouble while drunk was not uncommon for her. Brittany, where are you? In front of the downtown club. Please hurry. Reluctantly, I drove to where Brittany was. There were a few police officers standing in front of the club, and Brittany was sitting on the ground. She had a scratch on her cheek, and her hair was disheveled. A man in a suit was frowning as he spoke with the police officers. Are you her sister? One of the police officers asked me. Yes. What happened? It seems she hassled this gentleman over some drinks, and what started as a verbal altercation escalated when she hit him. Sigh. I involuntarily looked down at Brittany. She awkwardly avoided my eyes. No, that's not it. I just drank too much. But you did hit him, didn't you? The police officer said sternly. Yes. I'm sorry. Brittany was arrested on the spot. When we got home, my mother was waiting in the living room, looking worried. As soon as she saw me, she rushed over. Where's Brittany? What happened? I took a deep breath and chose my words as calmly as I could. Brittany. She's been arrested. My mother's face instantly turned pale. Arrested? Why? What did she do? She asked with a trembling voice. I briefly explained the situation to her. My mother sat down on the sofa, speechless for a while. Such. My Brittany. Despite her shock, she anxiously asked, She's not hurt, is she? Watching her, I felt a heavy weight in my chest. It felt like this was far from over. Fortunately, Brittany was released the next day, as it was her first offense, and the victim chose not to press charges. Though she was sternly warned by the police, Brittany seemed indifferent, as if it didn't involve her. Make sure this never happens again, they said. But her expression showed no remorse, and she seemed dissatisfied. Even after returning home, she didn't reflect on her actions, repeating excuses like, "It wasn't a big deal and I was just unlucky." My mother gently admonished her, "Please don't do this again," but she didn't scold her any more than that. Watching this, I couldn't contain my anger. Why wasn't she scolding her more strictly, Brittany's unrepentant demeanor only fueled my irritation, and a rage built up inside me. Enough already. You were only saved because the other party didn't press charges, but it could have been much worse. Brittany looked away, annoyed. So what? It's not a big deal. Unable to hold back my anger any longer, I snapped. Not a big deal? If that's what you really think, then I give up. Next time, it could really be the end of your life. My harsh tone finally made Brittany fall silent. Christina, don't be so angry. Brittany is repentant, isn't she? My mother said with a troubled smile, placing her hand gently on Brittany's shoulder, as if trying to smooth things over. Brittany's behavior, defended by my mother, only increased my irritation. Repentant? She's not. I crossed my arms and said in a cold voice, I've told you before, Brittany's drinking habits are terrible. Every time she drinks, she yells loudly and hassles people, and I've been embarrassed by her many times. Remember how many times I've had to pick her up? Can't she stop already? Shut up. I don't want to hear a lecture. Brittany slumped on the sofa, sulking, and didn't respond to my words. The next morning, I was still troubled by the previous day's events, but Brittany was eating breakfast as if nothing had happened. She was munching on bread and fiddling with her smartphone, looking like yesterday's turmoil had never occurred. Seeing this, I sighed. No matter what I said, it didn't seem to resonate with Brittany. As this realization set in, a sense of emptiness grew within me. Hey Mom, can you lend me some money? I need to relieve some stress and go shopping. What? I couldn't believe my ears. Money? Brittany, what are you talking about? I just need a change of scenery. Christina, it has nothing to do with you, so leave me alone. Nothing to do with me? Don't joke around. I couldn't hold back my anger and glared at Brittany. Have you already forgotten about yesterday? Do you even understand what you did? Oh, be quiet. It's over, isn't it? Brittany answered, annoyed, while fiddling with her smartphone. It's over? Don't joke around. Brittany sighed heavily, obviously annoyed. Christina, you're so persistent. I clenched my fists in frustration and anger. My mother looked on at our exchange, her gaze swimming with trouble. Mom, please. Brittany reached out to her. Just a little. My mother began to open her wallet when I reached out to stop her. No, don't do this to Brittany, Mom. But stop indulging Brittany. She hasn't reflected on yesterday's incident at all. Nothing will change at this rate. Christina, you're really cold, you know. Brittany muttered while fiddling with her smartphone. I didn't reply any further. I just realized that talking more would be futile. As these days continued, my grandmother's condition visibly worsened. She had been bedridden for a long time, but recently she had been eating very little, and her consciousness had become more clouded. Grandma, how are you today? My mother peered worriedly into her face. When she grasped her thin hand, my grandmother faintly opened her eyes. Sandra. Her voice was hoarse, as if it would disappear at any moment. Mom, shouldn't we take Grandma to the hospital? I suggested, but my mother just shook her head sadly. I've consulted with the hospital many times, but the doctor said it wouldn't be strange if she passed away any time now. Hearing that, I felt a tightening in my chest. Was her condition that bad? Despite knowing it, I had somehow convinced myself that she was still okay. That night, my grandmother quietly passed away. My mother cried, holding her hand, and I just stood there in shock. The next day, the funeral was held, and relatives and neighbors gathered. My mother wept as she looked at my grandmother's face and was unable to move for a while. I stood by her side, silently watching. After the funeral, we returned home to a quiet, changed space. The house felt colder without my grandmother, and my heart sank. My mother sat on the sofa, looking exhausted, and spent a long time in silence. I sat next to her, feeling time pass without saying a word. It felt as though time had stopped inside the house. The warm atmosphere that my grandmother had created was gone, replaced by silence. Meanwhile, Brittany sat on the sofa with a sullen face, playing with her smartphone. "Hey, I just wonder if we can get any donations." While my mother and I were immersed in grief, Brittany casually asked, "What?" I glared at her in disbelief. "Well, if there's money coming in, I kinda want some, you know." "Brittany, that's enough." It was rare for my mother to get angry. But Brittany shrugged without any sign of remorse. "Calm down. It's just a joke. Don't get so mad." After my grandmother's death, my mother spent her days sitting listlessly, doing nothing, just passing time quietly. The loss of my grandmother was immeasurable for her. My grandmother had been a psychological support for my mother, with whom she had a long-standing bond. But now that she was gone, my mother had lost that support and gradually began to depend more on Brittany. Every morning, my mother started by knocking on Brittany's door. "Brittany, what are your plans for today?" It was as if she was seeking direction for her own day, asking every morning. Even when going shopping, my mother always invited Brittany. "I don't want to go alone." "Brittany, can you come with me?" What seemed like a casual request at first became a source of annoyance for my mother if Brittany refused. Whenever Brittany spoke kindly, my mother would look relieved as if she had been saved. Seeing this, my heart ached. I understood my mother's loneliness, but I was uneasy about her excessive dependence on my sister. As my mother's dependency deepened, the atmosphere in the house grew heavier, and misunderstandings between my mother and me began to arise. But for Brittany, none of this seemed to matter. "Hey Mom, it's about time you cheered up," Brittany said lightly while playing with her smartphone. "There's no point in being sad forever." "Hey, why don't we go to Hawaii?" I grimaced. "What are you talking about?" "Well, Grandma has passed away and you don't have to take care of her anymore. Mom, you've been tied to the house for so long. Wouldn't it be nice to live in Hawaii and change your mood?" Brittany seemed as if she had come up with a great idea, smiling brightly at my mother. I couldn't contain my anger. "Brittany, stop joking. Grandma just died a month ago, you know." "So what? Staying home will just make you depressed. Besides, it has nothing to do with you, Christina, does it?" "Irrelevant? I'm the one supporting this house." "Ugh, whatever. Mom, what are you going to do?" My mother didn't say anything for a while. However, her expression seemed uncertain. I felt anxious. Surely she wasn't seriously considering Brittany's suggestion? That night, I collapsed into bed, utterly exhausted. With so many things to consider: home, work, my mother, and Brittany, it was hard even to sleep. 2 months had passed since my grandmother's death, and my emotions had somewhat stabilized. As usual, when I returned home from work, the house was eerily silent. "Mom." No response. I checked the entrance. Neither my mother's nor Brittany's shoes were there. As I entered the living room, I noticed something was off. The furniture was in place, but my mother's and Brittany's belongings were gone. It was as if they had never been there at all. Then I noticed a letter on the table. "To Christina. We are moving to Hawaii for Brittany. She only has me now. Grandma is gone, and I want to be there for her. Thank you for everything. I am grateful to you. Please take care of yourself. From Mom." After reading the letter, I stood there in silence, disbelieving. No, I didn't want to believe it. Don't joke with me. My mother had chosen Brittany over me, despite how hard I worked to support the family and help her care for my grandmother. And now, to abandon everything and move to Hawaii with Brittany? A mix of anger and emptiness surged within me. My thoughts were a jumble, and I couldn't sleep that night. Anger welled up, then despair, and each time I tried to sleep, I couldn't close my eyes. The words and thoughts in my mind expanded in the silence. The next day, I was awakened by a notification sound from my smartphone. It was from the bank. "Suspicious attempts to withdraw from your cash card have been detected." I immediately opened the app. There were records of multiple attempts to withdraw money from my cash card that morning. I understood instantly. It was my mother and sister Brittany. They had even tried to use my money. Trembling with anger, I immediately contacted the bank to block my cash card and, just to be safe, I also suspended my credit cards. "Are they stupid or something?" I muttered. And finally, I felt a slight calm. I had seen their actions coming. A little while ago, my mother had suddenly asked to borrow money. I found it strange at first, but couldn't refuse her and reluctantly lent her the money. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but something had felt off. Then one day I noticed documents about properties in Hawaii spread out on the table at home. There were many photos of houses and apartments in Hawaii with detailed information. At that moment, I realized my mother and Brittany were planning to live in Hawaii. Shock mingled with past events rushed through my mind. Perhaps my mother's request for a loan had been for this purpose. I wondered if there was some hidden intention behind it. That's why I had already changed the settings on my cards to restrict overseas use. My mother and Brittany would find themselves empty-handed in Hawaii. I thought calmly about what to do next. There's no need for me to stay in this house. Neither Brittany nor my mother needs me. Right? It's time to end this. I'll leave this house and start a new life. As I was packing my things, the phone rang. It was from my mother. I hesitated for a moment but decided to answer. "What do you want?" I said coldly. Well, actually there's something I need to tell you, Christina." My mother's voice trembled slightly. "What now?" "I know all about how you and Brittany tried to use my money without permission." I responded calmly. I was surging with anger but reminded myself not to become emotional. It wasn't supposed to be like this. But Brittany just wouldn't listen. My mother's words were vague. "So what? You betrayed me for Brittany." I pressed her firmly. "It's not like that. But for Brittany. I thought living in Hawaii was best for opening a Japanese restaurant there." That was. Her voice sounded confused. "That's enough. Mom, you're too lenient with Brittany. Have you forgotten how hard I've worked?" My voice trembled, but I continued coldly. "What do you think I've been working so hard for? I've seen all the attempts to withdraw money." My mother said nothing, and silence followed for a while. Finally, she spoke in a small voice. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this." I hung up abruptly, and almost immediately, my sister Brittany called. I answered the phone, still irritated. "Christina, please help me. I don't have enough money to open the restaurant in Hawaii. Do something." Brittany's voice was desperate. "Sort it out yourself. You always rely on Mom and me like this. How long do you plan to keep acting like a child? If you need money, why don't you get a job?" I chose my words harshly. "There's no reason for me to help you after you targeted my money." Brittany was silent for a while, then finally said, "I didn't mean to. Like that. It's too late for any excuses. This is it for us." I was cold in my dismissal. After hanging up, I told myself, this is the end. And I blocked my mother and sister Brittany's contacts. As I prepared to leave the house, the bitterness and helplessness of being betrayed by them spread deep within me. Despite the lingering emotions, only bitterness remained. I had worked desperately for the family, but in the end, they only thought of using me. It was time to end that relationship. Thus, I left the house and started a new life. Living alone for the first time felt somewhat unsettling, but I gained peaceful, undisturbed moments. I woke up at my preferred time in the morning and spent time after work just for myself. Having worked for my family before, I now had the luxury to invest in myself. I started studying for career advancement and even attempted to acquire certifications I had always been interested in. Every day was fulfilling, a stark contrast to my previous life bound by family. A few months later, I was promoted and my salary increased. With no worry of my family taking my money, I could save freely. I traveled and bought things I liked for myself. This is truly my life. I realized with satisfaction as I sipped my coffee. Later, curiosity got the better of me, and I checked social media, though I had resolved to stay uninvolved. Against my intentions, part of me still thought about them. Glancing at my sister Brittany's account, I saw a post screaming, "Help. Life in Hawaii is tough. Can't find a job. I don't know what to do anymore." Desperate words filled her timeline. I couldn't help but laugh. In the end, they couldn't manage anything. They probably realized that the life they had depended on my presence. "Christina, please help." A message from Brittany appeared on social media. The confident Brittany I knew was gone, replaced by desperate, almost tearful words. Yet, my heart remained unmoved. The old me would have helped without hesitation, but not anymore. I deleted the message without even reading it. After closing the screen, I felt as if something had been lifted off me. I was no longer their convenient person. They had chosen their path. They had to take responsibility for it. I set down my phone and murmured quietly while sipping my coffee. They made their bed. Now they must lie in it. My name is Allison White. I am 32 years old and work as a senior manager at Prescott International. My sister, Lucy, is 35 years old and a mother to 4-year-old twins, while my younger sister, Sophia, is 29 years old with a 6-month-old baby. Yes, life is ironic. Lucy got married right after graduating from university and chose the path of a typical housewife. Sophia is a freelance graphic designer, working from home while raising her child. And I have built my career in a 50-story office building in Manhattan. While others were building families, I spent my life buried in spreadsheets and in meeting rooms. That was my choice. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back, this choice had been gradually shaped over time. Although my parents were keen on education, they couldn't afford to send all 3 daughters to private universities. They paid all of Lucy's private university tuition. But when it was my turn, the situation changed dramatically. "Allison, I'm sorry, we can't afford your fees." Sophia is next. I still remember my mother's apologetic face. They had spent their savings on Lucy's tuition, and for Sophia they managed through educational loans and scholarships. But don't worry. "Allison, you can get scholarships." True to their words, I won scholarships for high achievers. I covered the shortfall with another scholarship, delivering newspapers and tutoring. While my sisters enjoyed shopping with friends on weekends, I studied in the library and worked at a drugstore at night. That had become my normal routine. My days started with delivering newspapers at 5 a.m. While cycling through the residential area, I reviewed the previous day's lectures aloud. From 8 a.m. I was in the library writing reports, and after afternoon lectures, I went to my tutoring job. I averaged 4 hours of sleep. "Allison, what about the upcoming exam?" One day, Sophia burst into my room crying. She struggled with math, so I cut my own study time to tutor her. I bought a whiteboard, installed it in my room, and conducted 2-hour one-on-one sessions every night. As a result, Sophia passed her exam with flying colors. Lucy's relationship advice always started late at night. "He hasn't contacted me. It seems like he went out with a female friend." Seeing my sister's tear-streaked face, I couldn't ignore her, even with an early morning newspaper delivery day coming up. Sometimes I even mediated between Lucy and her boyfriend. I accompanied my grandmother to the doctor twice a month. There were days I had to miss university. "Having Allison with me makes me feel safe," my grandmother used to say. Those words always warmed my heart. I read lecture notes in the waiting room, awaiting the doctor's call. I consistently maintained top grades. How do you do it? Even when friends asked, I didn't have an answer. Perhaps striving for my family was my motivation. "Allison is smart, she'll find her own way," my mother often said. Behind those words might have been the implicit expectation, so take care of the others. In reality, I had been the family's problem solver since my student days. My mother's words were both a source of pride and a heavy responsibility for me. This role as the family's problem solver had become part of my identity. I couldn't have imagined how it would affect my later life. On my desk, there's a family photo taken at my parents' silver wedding anniversary. My father, Robert, a gentleman, was a math teacher at a local high school. My mother, Debbie, a passionate woman, ran a small flower shop. In the photo, they were smiling happily. Next to it was a photo with my grandmother, Helen. When I was young, my grandmother often looked after us. Now at 85, her legs have weakened, and she needs assistance in her daily life. Yet her wisdom and kindness remain unchanged. One Friday afternoon, as I was preparing for an important meeting, my phone on my desk rang. It was Lucy. "Allison, I need to talk to you." Her voice, usually cheerful, carried a note of caution this time. "It's about our parents' 35th wedding anniversary." Sophia and I came up with a great idea. I looked up from the documents and leaned back in my chair. "What is it?" "A family trip to Hawaii. 2 weeks during the Christmas break. The kids will be out of school, and it's perfect timing." I began to do the math in my head. Hawaii, Christmas season, the whole family. "It seems like it will be quite expensive," I noted. "Yes, that's why we thought the three of us could share the costs as a gift for our parents," Lucy suggested. It sounded reasonable. Indeed, our parents had dedicated 35 years to raising us. My ability to attend university was also thanks to their support. They more than deserved this vacation. "That sounds good," I agreed. Lucy hesitated before continuing. "Actually, I was hoping you could take on a bit more of the burden." "More?" I asked. "Yes. Sophia and I have kids, so we have a lot of expenses. And you're single and earn a high salary," she explained. I was stunned. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. True, I did earn a good salary, but that was the result of years of hard work. I swallowed my words and asked Lucy, "How much are we talking about?" When Lucy mentioned the figure, I was shocked. It was equivalent to 2 months of my salary. But this was a special occasion. "All right." When I agreed, Lucy seemed relieved and hung up the phone. Later, a call from my mother followed. "Allison, thanks for the transfer this month. It always helps. And I was wondering if you could contribute a bit more to Grandma's caregiving costs. Your father and I are working hard, but it's still quite expensive," she said. I held back a sigh. My wallet seemed to be an open savings account for my family. I was already covering nearly half of my grandmother's home care costs. My grandmother had been living with my parents for several years now. However, while they claimed to be caring for her as a family, most of the actual caregiving was outsourced. In the midst of this, I was the only one who, despite my work schedule, frequently visited home to check on my grandmother. Considering everything, I couldn't just refuse. Reluctantly, I agreed to Lucy's request for travel funds and my mother's request for increased caregiving costs. I transferred the money to them that same day. After sending the money, I paused for a moment. Next month's rent, car loan, and money for my hobbies all crossed my mind. But as usual, I dismissed these thoughts. That evening, I returned to my apartment after work. As I gazed at the Manhattan skyline, I imagined the vacation in Hawaii, the blue ocean, white sand beaches, and quality time with family. Well, a vacation like that wouldn't be so bad, I muttered to myself. However, the dream didn't last long. A week later, Sophia called. "Allison, I need to ask you something," she said in a tone I already recognized. I had a feeling something troublesome was coming. "It's about Grandma." My stomach sank. My grandmother's condition had recently worsened. She struggled with stairs and needed assistance with bathing and meal preparation. Although she had caregivers visiting 3 times a week, it wasn't enough. While my parents insisted on caring as a family in reality, they were busy and left most of the burden to the caregivers and me. I visited my parents' home 2 to 3 times a week after work. I prepared meals appropriate for my grandmother's health, helped with her medication, and sometimes stayed late into the night. Meanwhile, Lucy and Sophia, citing their busy parenting schedules, hardly visited. "Allison, I want to move into a facility." My grandmother had said this several times. "I don't want to burden you, and I might make some friends of my own age." However, my parents staunchly refused this suggestion. It would look bad. "We should care for our grandmother as a family," they said. Behind these platitudes, the actual care was left to others. Just last weekend, I had visited home and spent time with my grandmother. As usual, I helped with the garden and enjoyed afternoon tea while looking through old albums. "Allison, you always take such good care of me," my grandmother smiled gently. "But you need to take care of your own life too, just like I did when I was young." Looking at photos of her younger years, I thought about the choices she had made in her life. After the war, she worked as a nurse and raised my mother on her own. She was a strong, independent woman. The reality that my grandmother now needed someone to care for her tightened my heart. "Hey, Allison," my grandmother suddenly became serious. "I don't want to take any more of your precious time because of me. I've been looking at brochures for facilities, like this one, which looks wonderful. My body is becoming less mobile, and I can't easily go outside anymore. I hate being bored. And I'm considering starting a new life in a new place to choose my own path." However, our conversation was interrupted by my mother's sudden return home. "Mother, we shouldn't be talking about this. We'll take care of you," she declared firmly. Her resolute attitude then ironically became a different reality now. "Someone has to look after Grandma while everyone is in Hawaii." A silence followed. I already knew the answer. "Me. But I'm supposed to be going on the trip." "I'm sorry, Allison, but there's no one else to look after Grandma. Our parents need a vacation, and Lucy and Sophia have kids." "What about respite care?" I suggested. "A professional care facility could take her for about 2 weeks. She could even socialize with people her age." "No." Sophia's voice suddenly grew firm. "We can't leave Grandma with strangers for 2 weeks. Maybe during the day, but not overnight stays. We're family, Allison. You might not understand, but we need to take care of our own." Those words struck me. Family. It had always been the magic word that moved me. Yes, this was a pattern that had continued for years, starting back in university. When I was a junior, Lucy suddenly decided to marry. "I'm getting married to Ryan," she announced after just 3 months of dating. Amidst our parents' worried looks, Lucy began dreaming aloud. A church wedding, a pure white dress, live music. "I want a beautiful wedding," she pleaded through tears. However, our parents couldn't afford to pay for everything. Then Lucy came to my room. "Allison, please. You're the only one I can rely on. We're family," she implored tearfully. As always, I had to help a family member in tears. I lent her my newspaper delivery job earnings for the dress. The ceremony indeed turned out to be wonderful. But then, the bills started coming to me. 2 years later, Sophia made a sudden decision. "I'm quitting university to start a graphic design company," she declared. She announced she was starting a design company. Our parents were strongly against it, but Sophia wouldn't listen. "If I don't start now, I'll miss the chance." "I'll definitely succeed," she insisted. I helped with the preparations for launching her company. However, Sophia's company did not take off as expected. Client issues, worsening financials. As expected, the company went bankrupt within a year. What remained was a debt of $20,000. "Allison, help me." Sophia called me in the middle of the night, and I poured all my entry-level salary into her debts. She promised monthly repayments, but those promises were never kept, and that brings us to today. Always bound by the word family, I have supported them in this way. I had sacrificed myself for it. But this time was different. That night, I held a glass of wine, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, thinking, always the dependable one, always fulfilling responsibilities. That had been my role, fulfilling my parents' wishes, supporting my sisters' lives, and now, even caring for my grandmother. But what about my life? I too had dreams and hopes. I pulled out a photo from my drawer. It was from 10 years ago, the day I graduated from university. Next to me in my gown, my parents and sisters smiled proudly. That day, my father told me, "Allison, you are our pride. You will surely lead a wonderful life." Those words became my driving force. But at the same time, they might have become a heavy chain. Meeting family expectations, making them proud, had become my mission. During lunch break, I went out with Michelle, my colleague and only friend who knew this situation. To be honest, Allison, she started. While picking at her salad, Michelle said, "Your family takes it for granted that you will always be there to help. If I were in your shoes, I would have exploded by now. But it's because they're family." That's exactly why. Michelle interrupted. Because they're family, you should also value your own life. You're always giving. It's time you learn to receive. Her words pushed me forward. The next morning, I made up my mind. As soon as I arrived at the office, I booked a luxury resort in San Diego, a beachside hotel, for the same 2 weeks as my family's trip to Hawaii. I also arranged my flight tickets. After making the reservations, I told no one in my family. I submitted my vacation notice at work and wrapped up all the necessary handovers. In the weeks leading up to the Christmas break, the calls from my family increased. They discussed travel preparations and detailed instructions for my grandmother's care. I responded to all with understood, but internally, I was progressing with different plans. On the first day of the Christmas break, I quietly left my apartment. My suitcase was packed with summer clothes and swimsuits. I turned off my mobile phone and boarded the plane. Upon arriving in San Diego, the warm California sun welcomed me. The hotel was fantastic. The sunsets visible from my room with an ocean view was breathtaking, and I could read undisturbed on the private beach. The first few days were blissful. I attended yoga classes in the morning, spent afternoons at the spa, and enjoyed delicious meals at nearby restaurants in the evening. It was a luxurious time spent without having to care for anyone or meet anyone's expectations, just enjoying time for myself. On the 4th day, curiosity got the better of me, and I turned on my mobile phone. I was immediately hit by a storm of missed calls and messages. "Lucy, where are you?" "Grandma is alone." "Sophia, I can't believe you would do something so selfish." "Mom, Allison, how could you let us down like this? Call us immediately." "Dad, Allison, what were you thinking? Come back right now." The messages continued, even from relatives. Aunt Susan criticized. "How could you abandon your family?" And Uncle Dan reproached. "You've let your parents down." That wasn't all. Lucy's husband, Ryan, reported, "The kids are crying," and Sophia's husband, William, sent a long, preachy message about valuing family bonds. I took a deep breath and blocked everyone. However, the content of the messages weighed heavily on me. As I sunbathed by the poolside, I began to question whether my actions were right. The only thing that troubled me was leaving my grandmother alone. But why should I always be the one to sacrifice everything? Is it fair that my vacation is taken away because my sisters have families and children? And above all, why wasn't I invited on the trip from the start? They took the travel expenses from me but planned to leave me as the caregiver. Is that really what a family should do? After 2 weeks, when I returned to my apartment, the entire family was waiting for me. They had interrogated Sarah about my travel plans in an almost threatening manner. My mother was crying, my father was trembling with anger, and my sisters were looking at me with eyes full of blame. "Let's hear your explanation," my father demanded. There was a severity in his voice I had never heard in my entire life. "There's nothing to explain. I replied calmly. I'm also a member of this family. I deserve to enjoy a vacation. But what about Grandma? Sophia yelled. We had to cancel our trip to Hawaii. We even incurred cancellation fees, and the kids were crying. Lucy said, It was supposed to be a trip to honor our parents. How could you do this to us? Yes, it's all my fault, I said sarcastically. But why wasn't I invited to the trip from the start? Why did you only take my money and plan to leave me as the caregiver? Silence took over the room. Lucy began but couldn't continue. We just assumed. Sophia admitted in a low voice. You've always helped. Yes, I've always helped. My voice trembled. I paid for my own university tuition with part-time jobs, managed the costs for Lucy's wedding, and helped Sophia with her debt repayments. But I did it because I love my family, not because it should be taken for granted. But you're single and don't have a family, my mother said in a low voice. You have the time and the money. Those words were the last straw. Don't have a family. My voice trembled. I do have a family. All of you are my family. But you don't treat me like family. I'm just a convenient tool, a convenient presence for you. Allison, that's not what we meant. My father began. I've had enough. I raised my hand. I've always said yes, always put my own life on hold to fulfill everyone else's wishes. But that ends now. What are you saying? Sophia asked. From today, I'm going to live my life. I'm done living according to everyone else's convenience. If you need help, ask, but don't assume it's my duty. And about Grandma, I've arranged for a nursing home. I've already discussed it with the facility. How could you? My mother screamed. Putting Grandma in a facility. Lucy's voice quivered. Yes, I'm putting her in a facility. There are professional staff there, and she can interact with people her own age. There's 24-hour medical care. It's the best choice for Grandma. Much better than shuffling family responsibilities among ourselves. And despite you all knowing she's wanted this, you've been pretending not to know, locking her up because of what people might think. My family was outraged. Words of anger and disappointment flew. My mother broke down crying, my father threatened to disown me, and my sisters accused me of changing. But I was no longer shaken. I entered my apartment alone. Outside the window, the Manhattan skyline shone. Where I used to find solace in that view, now I felt something different. A sense of strength and the anticipation of a new beginning. Weeks passed, and slowly the situation began to change. Initially hostile, my family started to accept the reality. My grandmother was adapting to the facility life better than expected. In the day room, she enjoyed playing cards with other residents, and she loved participating in the painting activities of the activity program. It's fun here, Allison, my grandmother told me during my visit. I never thought I'd make so many friends. My parents, too, gradually began to soften their stance. Especially my father, who started to acknowledge that the care at the facility was truly the best choice for my grandmother. Lucy and Sophia and I hadn't fully reconciled yet, but their aggressive attitudes had subsided. Perhaps they too needed time to reflect on their actions. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. I spent weekends on my hobbies, and I vacation wherever I want. At work, I've become more confident in expressing my opinions. Sometimes, my family tried to revert to old habits. They would ask for emergency babysitting or seek financial help. But I no longer said yes unconditionally. I'm sorry, but I'm attending an art class this weekend, I told them. The money I would have spent will go into my savings for the future. Initially, my family was taken aback by such responses. But gradually, they began to respect my boundaries. Surprisingly, this change had a positive impact on my relationships as well. I started interacting more at work and even found myself going on a date. His name was Nathan, an investment banker. He respected my career and understood my family dynamics. Recently, I received a call from my mother. It was a calm conversation, the first in a long time. "Allison, you were right," she said in a quiet voice. "We took you for granted. We should have valued your life and your dreams more." Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were different this time. They were tears of relief and new beginnings. Love is about giving and receiving. But one-sided sacrifice is not love. It took me 32 years to learn this lesson, but it's never too late. Now, there's a new photo on my desk. It's a selfie I took on the beach in San Diego. Next to it, there's a photo of my grandmother at her birthday party at the facility. She's surrounded by new friends, smiling happily. And now I can think about next month's family gathering with a sense of calm. There's no longer the same pressure as before. We're just meeting as equals, as family. Sometimes, life takes unexpected turns. But not all changes are for the worse. Sometimes, the hardest choices bring about the most necessary changes. My decision affected the entire family, but it led to a positive change. We are now building healthier relationships, understanding and respecting each other more. I had a happy childhood in a very ordinary family. We went on picnics with my parents, and I have memories of running through the park, accompanied by my mother's warm smile. Everything felt like an irreplaceable treasure. However, everything changed the moment my sister was born. Her name is Samantha. She joined our family when I was 6 years old. I understood even then how adorable a newborn baby could be. Both my parents adored Samantha, delighting in her every move. I never imagined that this would gradually begin to constrict my heart. My mother clearly started devoting more time and affection to Samantha. It began with small things. When I came home from elementary school, snacks were delayed because my mother was busy with Samantha. These small things escalated. From a young age, Samantha was flexible, and once my mother recognized her talent, she started taking her to ballet classes. The weekends were nearly consumed by driving her to and from ballet, and our family's plans revolved around her practices and recitals. Even when I wanted to go to the zoo, I was briskly dismissed with, "We don't have time for that." Family trips were similar. The chosen destinations were always places Samantha was interested in, and I quietly suppressed my own desires. By the time I was in middle school, the daily household chores had become my responsibility. After school, cleaning, laundry, and preparing dinner became my routine tasks, all because my mother wanted to focus on Samantha's practice. This felt beyond mere helping out at times. I felt treated like a servant. And the hardest part was the silent pressure from my mother. Even while I studied, she would frown and ask, "Aren't you done with the laundry yet?" I never heard the words, "Thank you for always helping out with the housework," or "You're doing great," which I longed for. On the other hand, Samantha always received kind words like, "You were wonderful on stage," or "You're really doing well." I felt isolated in my own home, and even when I tried to assert my place in the family, my mother always brought the conversation back to Samantha. As Samantha received accolades for her ballet, I supported her with mixed feelings, but believed in my heart that one day, my own worth would be recognized. I dreamed of the day when I could truly live my life freely. By my 3rd year in middle school, I was determined not to expect anything from my family anymore. I had to carve out my own life. By focusing on school club activities and planning to find a part-time job, I began to create my own world. It felt much freer and more authentic. Throughout high school, I worked harder than anyone else and kept my grades at the top of my class. As a result, I received an offer from a prestigious overseas university to study there as a scholarship student with a full tuition waiver. The only issue was covering my living expenses abroad. I brought up this topic during dinner after returning home from school one day. I heard from my teacher that I can study abroad as a scholarship student. The tuition is waived, so if you could just help with the living expenses. I said, my heart swelling with hope. My mother put down her chopsticks and sighed deeply. That's a great opportunity, "But we just can't afford it," she said. "What?" I was stunned by the unexpected response. My father continued, "Samantha is going to start lessons with a famous teacher next year, and that's going to be expensive. Supporting her dream is our top priority." "But what about my dream? This is the result of all my hard work," I argued desperately. My mother looked at me with a slightly cold gaze. "We simply don't have the money to cover your living expenses abroad. Why are you asking for something impossible?" Their words pierced me like a knife. Was my effort really worth so little compared to my sister's dream? Unable to secure my parents' support, I had to give up on the idea of studying abroad. Instead, I decided to attend a local university. "Why do I have to be the only one who sacrifices?" I repeated to myself over and over. Each time, feelings of frustration and loneliness welled up inside me. Still, I had to move forward. Determined to carve out a life on my own terms, I chose a new path. However, just as I was about to graduate from high school, a sudden piece of news came. My grandfather had passed away due to illness. From a young age, my grandfather had always shown me particular affection. When I heard of his death, an indescribable sadness filled my heart. His presence had been significant in my life, and I vividly remember the summer vacations we spent together and how seriously he listened to my plans for further studies. It felt as though a huge hole had been left in my heart. While mourning my grandfather, I graduated from high school and began attending a local university. As a university student, I juggled lectures and assignments while working as a tutor and at a bar in the evenings. I was driven by the desire to fund my own study abroad someday. As I was getting used to balancing my studies and part-time job, I found myself cleaning my mother's room as usual. There I discovered an old envelope. It was addressed to me. Casually checking its contents, I found a letter from my grandfather. It stated that he had left me a substantial inheritance for my study abroad expenses. Tears overflowed from my eyes upon learning this fact. It was a moment mixed with joy from my grandfather's support and anger towards my parents who had kept this hidden. Why should my dreams be cut off by family choices? Is it acceptable to trample on my grandfather's intentions? These questions raced through my mind. I asked my mother about the letter from my grandfather. Her face changed color immediately, trying to maintain her composure. "Ah, that. I was planning to give it to you, but somehow forgot," she said, lining up a common excuse that tightened my heart. "But why didn't you give it to me immediately?" If I had read the letter, I wouldn't have had to give up on studying abroad. As I pressed her, my mother shrugged lightly and said, Sorry. I was just too busy with Samantha at the time and forgot about it." Her insincere apology only added to my confusion. "Are we done here?" As if to protect herself, my mother tried to end the conversation. After speaking with my mother, I continued to harbor mixed feelings. When I inquired about the letter and the inheritance, my mother's vague answers returned. The conflict between not being able to believe her words about forgetting and hesitating to push too hard swirled inside me. Despite these emotions, I continued my days dedicated to making my study abroad dreams a reality by focusing on my studies and part-time job. As soon as my university lectures ended, I would head to the bar where I worked as a bartender. Initially, even taking drink orders was a challenge, but gradually I honed my cocktail-making skills and found the space to enjoy conversations with customers. There were regulars who began to request their unique cocktails directly from me, which gave me a great sense of accomplishment. One night, a regular customer who always sat at the same counter seat spoke up. "You work very seriously. When I come to this bar, I always end up wanting to talk to you." His words brought warmth to my weary heart. As I listened to him, it turned out that he was the president of a top-tier hotel. He was keenly interested in how I started this job and what I aimed for in the future. Slightly nervous, I shared my dreams. "Actually, I would like to study hospitality and culture abroad someday." That's why I'm saving money while continuing my studies." He listened silently to my earnest explanation, then smiled and said, "Your attitude is admirable. Would you like to come and see our hotel?" It was a surprising offer. Never had I imagined that working diligently at a bar could lead to an opportunity directly connected to my dreams. Slightly bewildered, I gratefully accepted his offer. A few days later, guided by him, I visited the top-tier hotel, which far surpassed my imagination with its elegant interior and meticulous service. I was overwhelmed yet deeply moved. During the tour, he told me, "The experience here will definitely be useful for your future. Would you like to work here?" I was taken aback by his words. Filled with gratitude for this unexpected opportunity, I felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of growing in this place. "Thank you. I would like to cherish this opportunity," I said, and decided on the spot to take the job. From then on, my life changed significantly. My days began to revolve around university lectures by day and working at the hotel by night. The job at the hotel was tougher than I expected, with a lot to learn, but as I sincerely engaged in each task, I absorbed new knowledge and skills. Supported by colleagues and superiors, I gradually earned their trust. In this way, I took my first steps in carving out a life on my own terms. After graduating from university, I started working full-time at the hotel, utilizing my cocktail skills and customer service abilities learned during my student days, and gradually mastering new tasks. Through the challenging experiences at the hotel, I felt myself growing bit by bit. After getting a job at the hotel, I moved out of my family home and started living alone. While I felt the sadness of leaving the familiar home, I was also thrilled with the anticipation of independence. My small yet clean apartment symbolized freedom and challenge. 2 years into my hotel job, my sister successfully graduated from high school and was accepted into the vocational school she had longed for. When I heard the news, I felt truly happy for her and proud of her efforts. One day, I received a call from my mother's sister. "By the way, did you know Samantha is going to study abroad to join a ballet company? It seems like it was expensive, but you guys must have saved up properly." Study abroad? Savings. As I responded with curiosity, my aunt continued nonchalantly, "Well, it's quite a sum, isn't it? And they managed to send you to university too. Impressive, isn't it?" Feeling uneasy with her words, I decided to confirm with my mother. "Mom, is it true Samantha is studying abroad? How did you manage the expenses?" My mother's expression stiffened for a moment, but she quickly composed herself and answered, "We paid for it with the money we had saved up for her." "Is there a problem?" At that moment, I could not hide my turmoil. I vividly remember when I expressed my desire to study abroad, my mother had firmly stated, "We don't have that kind of money." At that time, I had no choice but to give up my dream. Yet there was saved money for my sister. Knowing this fact, I felt a tightness in my chest. Why is their treatment of us so different? Every time I felt that my sister was more valued, childhood memories resurfaced. Me being denied the things I longed for, while she easily got them as if it were natural. Emotions that had been simmering in my heart for a long time resurfaced. "Is there a problem?" My mother's casual question seemed to leave no room for imagining the impact I felt. That's why it hurt even more. I wanted to be valued too. I couldn't deny that feeling within me. From that day, I started to distance myself from my parents. The hotel job became a refuge for me, and I found myself immersed in it. Amidst the busy days, I was trying to regain myself. Even when I returned home tired, the sense of accomplishment from work began to support me little by little. One day, my parents suddenly called me home to talk, and there was an ominous air about it. With a sense of dread, I headed to my parents' house. Amidst various anxious thoughts, I was not prepared for what awaited me. Upon entering the house, my father seemed unusually subdued. When I asked, "What's wrong?" my mother opened her mouth with a puzzled look. Actually, your father was deceived by a friend and lost a lot of money. Surprised, yet trying to grasp the situation, I asked, "How much are we talking about?" Maintaining my composure, I pressed for details, and my mother answered in a low voice. "About $40,000. It was money we had borrowed." $40,000? How are you going to repay it? That's why we have a favor to ask. Could you lend us some money just for a while? Confused by the unexpected proposal, yet seeing my mother's earnest expression, I was at a loss for words. However, unable to abandon my family, I eventually agreed to temporarily provide funds by setting up a new account. "All right, but please make sure to repay the money once things settle down." "Thank you, it really helps us a lot," my mother said with tears in her eyes. My father also apologized with a look of regret. However, the unease lingering in the air was not entirely dispelled. Months later, on Thanksgiving, I returned home after a long absence, enveloped by nostalgic smells. As I opened the door, the savory scent of turkey roasting wafted from the back. In the living room, my parents sat on the sofa, and Samantha, who had returned home temporarily from her studies abroad, was there too. Next to her sat her boyfriend. I was a bit surprised and felt a twinge of wariness inside. Samantha was laughing and talking happily with him, and my father began to speak joyfully as he watched them. "Look, isn't Samantha's boyfriend handsome? Plus, he works at that top-tier company," he said. My mother also nodded proudly, unconsciously boasting about Samantha's boyfriend. Each word tightened my chest, and my gaze shifted away. "Mom, you mentioned recently that studying abroad was expensive for Samantha. What happened with that?" I asked cautiously. My mother quickly responded, "Well, she improved her grades, so I gave her a bit more money. But her boyfriend helps out a lot, so it should be fine. His parents like Samantha a lot and support her too." Samantha's boyfriend's parents were wealthy and well-known locally. His family owned a large estate known for hosting lavish parties each year. His father was the CEO of a well-known company, and his mother was a socially influential figure. When Samantha started dating him, I was astounded by his family's status and wealth. The conversation continued with stories about Samantha and her boyfriend. Initially, I listened with a smile, but gradually I grew weary. As the boasts about his achievements and romantic surprises continued without end, I nodded along while inwardly sighing. Even during this precious family time, the focus was solely on her and her boyfriend. I tried to change the subject, but Samantha paid no heed, and I ended up just listening silently. A few days after Thanksgiving, I went to the local supermarket to pick up some groceries. As I walked through the store, I suddenly heard my name called from behind. Turning around, Aunt Dorothy stood there with a smile. "Oh, it's been a while. How have you been?" "Aunt Dorothy." "It's been a long time. I'm doing well. And you haven't changed a bit." "Thank you. By the way, have you heard about Samantha's engagement party?" "An engagement party?" Surprised, I listened as my aunt continued cheerfully. "Yes. They're planning it for next spring in Hawaii." "In Hawaii? That sounds incredibly lavish." "Yes, they're inviting his family too, so it'll be a bit of a trip." "You're going, right?" Caught off guard by the sudden news, I clenched my shopping basket. "No, I haven't heard anything yet." "How will the party expenses be managed?" "You don't need to worry about that. Dad left Samantha an inheritance, which will be used for that." "An inheritance?" I gasped at the unexpected revelation. While suppressing the urge to confront further, I ambiguously replied, "Is that so?" But I felt a turmoil inside me. Believing my own efforts had limits, I hired a detective to investigate, and it was revealed that my parents were using the study abroad funds left to me by my grandfather for Samantha's engagement party in Hawaii without my knowledge. Moreover, the lavish plan amounted to more than $40,000. I felt there was something beyond my imagination hidden in my parents' plans, and this realization sparked decisive anger. All the feelings of alienation, unfairness, and being unloved that I had long felt suddenly exploded. One night, taking advantage of my parents being out, I went to my family home and logged into my mother's computer. What I found was more unbelievable than I had anticipated. Information that had been hidden from me now came into view one by one, making my chest tighten. Various reservation details were recorded there. Carefully and with intense emotion, I reviewed the details of the travel booked for Samantha's engagement party. A lavish holiday plan in Hawaii costing over $40,000 was neatly arranged. Initially, the amount didn't seem serious to me, but as I sat there, every feeling of unfairness I had felt lined up before my eyes. I canceled all reservations except for the travel costs. It wasn't about retrieving the large sum of money, but intended as a retaliation against my parents. My initial calmness was nowhere to be found. I proceeded driven by emotion. After confirming the cancellations, I quietly left the house. In the car on the way back, I decided to cut ties with my parents. I felt there was no point in continuing this relationship any longer. As planned, my parents and sister went to Hawaii. But upon their arrival, they learned that all reservations for the hotel and the engagement party had been canceled. My parents were shocked and unable to understand what had happened, attempting to contact me immediately. However, I had already blocked their contacts and no calls or messages could reach me. The situation quickly deteriorated, but I accepted my decision quietly without any regrets. Ultimately, my sister and her boyfriend, along with his parents, had to explain the situation and bear the costs. Later, I heard from my aunt that Samantha had boastfully posted about her engagement party on social media, making my heart ache. I couldn't bear how it seemed to be no problem for her at all. Unable to suppress the turmoil in my heart, I decided to consult a lawyer. When I asked the lawyer to investigate, a shocking fact was revealed. Samantha's study abroad expenses had also been funded by my grandfather's inheritance. Without my knowledge, my grandfather's inheritance had been continually used solely for Samantha. Unable to contain my frustration and anger, I decided to sue for the return of the inheritance. At that time, my parents had just returned from the engagement party in Hawaii. Without any time to relish their pleasant trip, they were bewildered by the documents from the lawyer that had arrived at the house. What does this mean? My father, holding the papers, looked at my mother in confusion. Upon learning that I was formally demanding the return of the inheritance through a lawyer, my parents seemed to realize the seriousness of the matter for the first time. However, my resolve was unshaken. To correct years of unfairness, I decided to fight. Then, I took a step further and directly called Samantha's boyfriend. I told Samantha's boyfriend about my parents borrowing money from me and using the money my grandfather had left for my study abroad for her engagement party. At first, he refused to believe it, saying, "That can't be true." However, I calmly explained the facts and sent him emails as evidence. After a moment of silence, he exhaled softly and murmured, "Samantha never mentioned any of this to me." Eventually, this information reached his parents as well. As a result, my sister and parents completely lost their credibility, and Samantha's engagement was broken off. Samantha had managed to cover her study expenses with support from her boyfriend's parents, but she lost that support too. Ultimately, she couldn't continue her studies, and her dreams were shattered. Samantha blamed me, repeatedly slandering me on social media. The narrative was skewed to make it seem like all the fault was mine. After seeing Samantha's social media posts, my aunt contacted me, and I decided to tell her everything that had happened. My aunt was shocked but believed me and apologized on behalf of my mother for her treatment of me over the years. Even after receiving my aunt's apology, I couldn't bring myself to forgive my mother. The anger towards her betrayal did not subside, and my feelings did not ease. I also felt similarly closed off towards my sister and father. Reflecting on everything, I realized I had been the only one sacrificed while they lived at their convenience. I felt that the trust and affection as a family could never be restored. In the lawsuit, I won, and the money my grandfather had left me was fully returned. The wrongdoing of my parents and Samantha's side was exposed, and the judge recognized my claims. It was a long battle, but I was relieved that my grandfather's inheritance was restored to its rightful form. Though my relationship with my parents was irreparably broken, I had no regrets. I had righted the injustice and protected my rights. I'm sure my grandfather would be pleased with the outcome. I cut ties with my parents and decided to open my own bar using the money my grandfather had left me. Ready to completely change my lifestyle, I invested all my energy into building everything from scratch, without looking back. The menu at my bar featured original cocktails I created, and their new flavors began to spread by word of mouth. Gradually, the reputation grew, and many customers started visiting my bar. In no time, my bar achieved success, and I felt a firm confidence in its accomplishment. Through my aunt, my mother tried several times to contact me, apologizing for the past and trying to rebuild our relationship. However, I ignored all her attempts. No matter what she said now, I no longer wanted any involvement with her, and her attempts only drove me further away. I didn't want to carry the burden of the past and focused fully on living in the present. One night, my bar was bustling with a full house of customers. Across the counter, I saw a scene of everyone smiling and enjoying their conversations, with me at the center. It was a moment when the success I had achieved and the efforts I had made to get here bore fruit. Someday, when work settles down, I plan to go study abroad, fulfilling the dream I once had. Freed from my family, I have carved out my life with my own efforts. I truly felt happy. The lights in the bar softly illuminated the interior, and I smiled quietly to myself. "What are you drawing?" Grandma asked as she approached me. I was absorbed in drawing using a red pencil. "I'm drawing the birthday cake we ate together," I said proudly as I finished drawing a glossy red strawberry and showed it to Grandma. In front of me there was a lavish cake, surrounded by familiar images of Grandma and friends. A happy smile spread across my face, and Grandma squinted her eyes, smiling gently. "Nadine, your drawing is very good." "You're like a professional painter," Grandma said, patting my head warmly. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of her hand and the happiness it brought. I love my grandma deeply. Even with little affection from my parents, the warmth of Grandma's hand was enough to keep me going. My name is Nadine, and I'm 28 years old. I love to draw and read books. During the day, I work as an office clerk at a small company, and at night, I write in my diary or draw comics, posting them on my blog and Instagram. I illustrate small daily life events in a humorous way, always trying to end on a positive note, even if I fail. As I do this, I can stay positive about my real life too. I'm so happy when people resonate with my posts and leave comments or likes. My proactive approach to life is also influenced by the environment I grew up in. I remember a story about a famous writer who was approached by a beautiful actress. "Wouldn't it be wonderful if a baby was born with your intellect and my looks?" the actress said. The writer replied, "The child might end up with your intellect and my looks though." The actress had hoped for a sister, but the writer had warned of me. My father works for a major company in LA. My mother was once a beauty pageant star. I've inherited my father's looks and my mother's intellect, along with their complexes. Relatives often say, "You have your father's nose," or "Your mother wasn't good at studying either." These words irritated my parents, so I gradually became treated as a disappointment. On the other hand, my younger sister Flora, 3 years my junior, was known in our community for her cuteness and intelligence. She charmed adults with her clear eyes, high nose bridge, fair skin, and smooth hair. She was loved like an angel, and everyone adored her, calling her cute. Our parents also loved her deeply as the ideal daughter, lavishing her with affection as if to affirm their love. Flora, meanwhile, learned to turn their love towards herself by cleverly casting me as the villain. When a dish was broken, she would say, "Nadine dropped it." When she neglected her practice lessons, the excuse was, "Nadine stopped me." When money was missing from Mother's purse, she would claim it was under Nadine's instruction. I was always the one to bear the consequences of her actions. Despite the falsehoods, our parents always blamed me and held me accountable. They accepted the false narrative of me, jealous of my excellent sister, bullying her without question. Living in this house felt like hell. Yet I managed not to fall into despair thanks to the kindness of friends and my father's mother. Especially my nearby grandmother always warmly welcomed me whenever I was driven out of our house. Grandma repeatedly cautioned my parents, but when my mother vehemently argued back, blaming Grandma, I had no choice but to mediate, saying, "It's okay, it's my fault." This situation visibly angered my parents, and Grandma showed a sad expression. Instead, she poured deep affection into me, spoiling me greatly. Once, while Grandma was folding laundry, she saw a drawing I made on the back of a flyer and praised me. "Nadine, you have a talent for drawing," and gifted me high-quality drawing paper and a set of 36 colored pencils. For my birthday, when they didn't celebrate for me, Grandma prepared a huge whole cake. "We can't eat all of this by ourselves," she said with a laugh, and also invited friends. At Grandma's house, enjoying hamburgers and a rich cream cake, and opening gifts from friends, that moment of happiness was something I will never forget. My parents were aware that I frequently stayed at Grandma's house. Initially, they were angry, saying, "A child spoiled by her grandmother won't grow up to be a good adult." But they quieted down as I reached the upper grades of elementary school. They focused on perfecting Flora, completely losing interest in me. The harsh treatment towards me ceased, and they began to ignore my presence as if I had never existed from the start. Only the bare essentials for living were provided, and that was all. By the time I became a middle school student, I realized that my parents no longer cared about me. Still, I hadn't completely given up hope, but when I was told coldly in my third year of middle school, "We can't afford your school fees because your sister needs to take entrance exams," I finally gave up on receiving any love from them. Despite my father working at a major corporation and being fully capable of affording my tuition, when Grandma heard this, she was so furious she seemed about to burst a blood vessel and suggested, "I'll pay for your schooling. You should come and live with me and go to high school." I intended to refuse, feeling sorry, but when I saw Grandma crying, saying, "Poor Nadine," I couldn't stop my own tears and hugged her. Later, with the help of my homeroom teacher, I took the exams without my parents knowing and was able to enter a nighttime high school. I left home to start a new life at Grandma's house, working part-time during the day and going to high school in the evenings. Grandma said I didn't need to work, but I wanted to earn at least my own living expenses. After graduating high school, I left Grandma's house and found a job as an office clerk at a small company in the neighboring prefecture, where I continue to work. I gave my parents my address, but they neither visited nor sent letters. We became completely estranged, even during Christmas. However, I finally managed to become independent and leave that house. I have always lived looking forward. Then one day I received a letter from my sister for the first time. Inside the fancy envelope was an invitation to my sister's wedding. My sister, 25 years old, and having barely seen her since middle school graduation, seemed to be marrying a high-earning man, much like our father, capitalizing on our mother's beauty. Reuniting with such a family was painful, but I was the only sister she had. If I didn't attend, it might raise suspicions in her in-laws' family. I have been working as a professional for 10 years now. Even though I am not the perfect daughter my parents envisioned, showing that I am living a decent life might improve our relationship, even if slightly. I will attend my sister's wedding after 10 years of estrangement, I casually posted on my blog, and received heartwarming comments from my followers. With courage, I marked "will attend" on the invitation. The day of my sister Flora's wedding finally arrived. As the bride's sister who must not be late, I drove early to the venue. The venue was an enchanting building modeled after a castle in a theme park, like something out of a fairy tale. Guided by the staff, I entered a room reserved for family. There were my aged parents and my beautiful sister, already dressed in her wedding gown. Flora. Overwhelmed, I barely managed a greeting. They looked at each other and said, "See, Mom? I told you she would definitely come." What I was taken aback by my sister's words. Mother exaggeratedly shrugged her shoulders, like a character from a cartoon. "To think you'd show up at your sister's wedding after dropping out of middle school is beyond me." "What do you mean?" "You really haven't changed, still so thoughtless." Father, his hair thinned, looked at me with an expression of surprise. Even though I expected to be considered a nuisance by my family, I hadn't expected such a clear and harsh response. It was unjust to be criticized as insensitive just for attending my sister's wedding. "Flora, you sent the invitation, didn't you?" I asked cautiously. She smiled and frowned slightly. "Yes, I sent it. But even someone like you is family, so how could I not invite you?" Her usual sharp tone was there, but this was not the time for it. "So why do you resent me being here? Did you actually want me to come?" Pointing out the contradiction, my sister touched her cheek and tilted her head. "Actually, that was true. But recently I realized it would be better to pretend you no longer exist than to invite you and have everyone ridicule your lack of education." "What?" "I realized it just a month ago. I meant to tell you, but then today arrived." "What does that mean? You behave as if I no longer exist, and you even find it troublesome to tell me?" Shocked by this incredible fact, my mother's piercing gaze stabbed through me. "It can't be helped. You have no experience with marriage, nor a likely partner, so you might not understand, but preparing a wedding is very hectic. Also, since we didn't actually think you'd come, I told Flora she won't come if she understands her place personally. If I were in your shoes, I wouldn't have the courage to attend a wedding. It would be too embarrassing, right?" Mother said with an unnatural laugh. "Don't say such sad things, Mom. I always believed my sister would come. We wanted her to feel recognized and loved as part of the family, that she's needed." "What are you talking about?" "I'm sorry for giving you false hope. But don't worry, we'll remember you as the kind sister who passed away early from a brain disease," Flora said. She looked at me with pity. "It's impossible that a lie made up so suddenly would be believed by our relatives and your husband. Don't worry. You haven't been in contact with our relatives for a long time, right? It's a well-known fact that you were isolated within the family. And I told them she wanted us to have a quiet funeral without overshadowing my wedding, only with the family. So there won't be any further questions. I've told my husband as well. He believes whatever I say." What a thing to do. Indeed, since graduating from middle school, I had barely met anyone other than Grandma. There were relatives who worried about me, but that was 10 years ago. If they were told I had died, they would believe it without doubt. At that moment, as I stood there dazed, my father threw something at me. It was the seating chart for the wedding. "Take a look at this. Flora is marrying into a family of doctors. We can't introduce someone like you at such an event." I quietly opened the document and saw many names associated with doctor on the groom's side. "Take it as a keepsake and leave quickly. You no longer exist in this world. Ha ha ha." At that moment, I heard my father's voice filled with disdain, along with the laughter of my sister Flora and my mother. Feeling dizzy, I rushed out of the venue. I hurried to my car and tried to start the engine with trembling fingers. However, I couldn't properly transmit strength to my hands. Tears flowed one after another, a mix of sadness, irritation, and hatred. It felt like a palette where dark colors of paint were chaotically mixed, reflecting my disordered state of mind. Knowing they would never change, I couldn't stop feeling pathetic and irritated at myself for having hoped. I vaguely watched people heading to the venue through the glass. Knowing I should not be here, I couldn't move my heavy body. Then, suddenly, my smartphone vibrated in my bag. As my hands grew cold, I took it out and saw a notification for a comment on Instagram. Because I had posted about attending my estranged sister's wedding yesterday, there were comments of concern and encouragement from friends and followers. Moved by their warm words, I used the story feature for the first time and shared my vulnerability. My family has declared me dead. It seems I have no reason to live anymore. As I typed, tears flowed incessantly. Soon after, another notification for a new message sounded. Encouraging words kept coming in. Nadine, you are not worthless. Nadine, I love your illustrated diary and your warm personality. I have been helped by Nadine's diary entries. Cut ties with such a family, Nadine. These were all words of anger and sadness from people I didn't know, who were speaking out for me. I had completely lost my confidence, but these words gradually began to sink into my heart. Then, apparently having seen my Instagram, my best friend called me crying. Nadine, hold on. Such an obvious lie can't be sustained forever. Act with confidence for your grandmother who cares so much about you. With these words, I suddenly came back to myself. For my grandmother, who cries, gets angry, and laughs for me. She must be at this wedding venue, without a doubt. Just thinking about how sad my grandmother would be if she heard I had died stirred up anger inside me. I am not a worthless person. I am not someone who should be ashamed of being alive. The ones who should be ashamed are those who scorn someone trying hard to live. I took a handkerchief from my pocket and firmly wiped my tears. Then I straightened my eyeliner and quietly opened the car door. When I returned to the venue, the reception had already started. I secretly peered inside through the glass. It seemed that a slideshow of the bride and groom's growing up was currently being shown. The slideshow included photos of our family, including me, and at the end of the presentation, the host mentioned the story of the bride's sister, who passed away from an illness a few months ago. This caused a stir among the relatives, and everyone turned to look at my parents. My father stood up and said Flora's sister died suddenly of a brain disorder. She was very kind, and she got along well with Flora, but was worried that her own illness might delay her sister's wedding. Next to him, my mother was pressing a handkerchief to her eyes. I couldn't believe that they could lie so boldly about me, whom they had just been talking with. The guests were unable to hide their astonishment as my father, with tears streaming down his face, said, "She must be happy in heaven." "Excuse me, do you have any business here?" a staff member approached me, asking with a tense expression. When I answered, "Actually, my sister asked me to do this surprise." "Are you referring to the bride as your sister?" the staff member asked with a puzzled look. I smiled and responded, "Yes, that's right," and firmly opened the doors to the venue. The moment I entered through a door near the family seats at the back where the bride's father was sitting, all eyes immediately turned to me. Feeling overwhelmed by all the gazes, I recalled the words of encouragement from my friend and regained my composure. My parents, unaware of my presence, continued to spin their fabricated tales about me. Only my sister, seated at the high table, noticed me and hurriedly stood up. Before Flora could say anything, I raised my voice louder than ever before. "I am Nadine, the bride's sister." It took me a while to get back. Yes, hell was quite warm. I sweated a lot. The venue fell silent instantly with my greeting. Oops, my mistake. Not hell. I was in heaven, right? It was a brain disease, wasn't it? I tilted my head and joked, although my heart was pounding hard. As the venue froze in shock at the bizarre situation, my sister was the first to recover. "Who are you?" "My beloved sister is no longer in this world. How dare you make such a cruel joke? Someone, get this person out of here!" Flora yelled from the high table. It seemed they were trying to expel me before I was noticed. However, cries of surprise soon erupted around me. "Nadine! Is that Nadine?" Grandma slowly stood up and walked towards me, staggering. "Nadine, is it really you, Nadine?" "Oh, I'm so relieved. I couldn't believe it when they said you had died." Grandma's hands trembled as she grasped the edge of my dress. I firmly grasped her hand in return. "Grandma, it's me, Nadine. Your beloved Nadine." "Oh, Nadine, thank you." I immediately wrapped my arms around her to steady my staggering grandmother. My father's sister, who always looks after Grandma, hurried over. "Nadine, are you really okay? You're not ill?" While supporting Grandma, I looked at my aunt's worried face and nodded slightly. After handing Grandma over to my aunt, I scanned the venue again. The groom's side of the room was noisy, and the groom himself looked shocked. The bride's side was also disturbed, but especially my sister and parents looked pale. Straightening the wrinkles in my dress, I gathered my courage and began to speak boldly. "Thank you all for gathering here today. I apologize for the inconvenience at such a celebratory occasion. I am Nadine, the bride's sister. In fact, I was supposed to attend today, but my sister and parents told me to leave, because we're going to tell everyone you suddenly passed away." The room grew even noisier. "I hope you can understand my desire not to shock my beloved grandmother," Nadine Grandma whispered in a hoarse voice. "I was denied by my own family because I could not live up to their expectations. From a young age, I was constantly compared to my sister and discriminated against for my appearance and abilities." Wait a minute. My father was visibly shaken by my disclosure. However, I ignored his reaction and continued. "My sister, perhaps influenced by our parents, or maybe it's just her nature, always made me out to be the villain, monopolizing their affection. Whenever she caused any trouble, the blame was always shifted to me." "That's not true." My sister interrupted my statement. As the attention shifted to her, she began to tremble and tears started to flow. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's embarrassing to say, but my sister has a habit of lying. This caused me to hesitate to invite her to the wedding, and I ended up falsely claiming she had died. I apologize for that lie. Flora." The groom, confused but supportive, stood by my sister. Amid the confusion, with attendees unsure of whom to believe, it was Grandma who changed the atmosphere of the room. How disgraceful her strong, deep voice resonated throughout the venue. "You have always bullied Nadine. Do you even have a human heart?" "But Grandma." "Don't make excuses. It's disgraceful. Don't shame us further." "Ah." Under Grandma's stern rebuke, my sister trembled. "I'm leaving now. I didn't want to attend this ceremony originally, but I came because I thought Nadine would be here. I should not have come to such a pitiful event. Nadine, let's go home." Grandma warmly grasped my hand. I wanted to say more, but the warmth of her hand soothed my heart. "Yes, let's go home." As we were leaving the venue, I heard my mother making a clumsy excuse. "Flora's grandmother has been getting a bit forgetful." I quickly closed the door behind us to shut out her words. "Nadine, come to my house tonight. I'll make your favorite donuts," Grandma said gently as she stroked my hand. "Yes, yes, thank you, Grandma." Relieved by her words, I clung to Grandma and cried. Shortly after, all the relatives on my father's side left the venue. They were fed up with my sister and parents' reprehensible actions and had lost all desire to celebrate. "Nadine, I'm sorry. I knew you were being treated harshly but couldn't intervene in family matters. I should have supported you more," my aunt apologized tearfully. As I comforted her, stroking her back while she cried, I understood that it's hard to interject in another family's affairs. Ultimately, I left the venue with my father's family. I hadn't told everything to my parents, but I felt proud that I had faced the situation head-on without running away. While relaxing and enjoying donuts at Grandma's house, chaos ensued back at the wedding venue. My sister and parents argued to the groom's side that I was an uncontrollable person and that Grandma was experiencing cognitive decline. However, since a large part of my father's family had already left the ceremony in protest, few believed their claims. Their repeated excuses only deepened the bad impression, and many guests left the venue one after another. During this, The groom stood by dumbfounded, while his parents apologized to the remaining guests and encouraged them to head home. Visibly angry, my sister and my ever-changing parents declared, "We will recheck the facts and consult with the appropriate authorities if necessary before leaving the scene." As the venue emptied, my sister and parents showed no signs of self-reflection under the watchful eyes of the staff. Blinded by their misconceptions about me, they angrily headed to my apartment in the neighboring state where I live. But at that time, I was leisurely enjoying donuts at Grandma's house, soaking in a warm bath, so I wasn't home. My father, frustrated that the door wouldn't open, kicked it, and my sister picked up stones from around and shattered the windows. A concerned neighbor thought the disturbance was suspicious and called the police, resulting in the arrest of my parents and sister on the spot. Shocked by the call from the police and the landlord's story, I was reassured by the landlord's sympathy, who encouraged me, saying, "You are a decent person. This is just unfortunate." After explaining the circumstances behind my family's actions to the police, they sympathized and recommended that I stay with relatives for my safety. Later, I met with the family that was supposed to become my sisters-in-laws and apologized for the chaos at the wedding. I offered to pay compensation, but they refused, saying, "You have suffered as much as us." The truth about her came out before the marriage, which is fortunate, said the man who was supposed to be her husband, showing a helpless smile. He had contacted a detective agency immediately after the wedding to investigate my sister's past. The investigation revealed numerous falsehoods spun by my sister and parents. One such lie was that my sister attended a prestigious university and graduated, which I had also believed. However, I was surprised to learn that she had dropped out after 2 years because she tried to get close to a married professor for better grades and was subsequently sued by his wife. She boasted about working at a large corporation, but in reality, she was only working part-time at a convenience store inside the company's building. Flora, even while working part-time, got close to a married man who visited her workplace and was sued again by the man's wife. After losing her job, she met the groom. He quickly took a liking to Flora and was not concerned about her educational or employment history. The groom's parents were not fixated on a profession as a doctor and accepted their son's choice of partner. However, Flora's lies were eventually exposed, leading to the annulment of the engagement, and she was told to never come near again. Flora and our parents were left with the bills for 2 previous lawsuits, the wedding, honeymoon, and a new home. Additionally, there were repairs needed for my apartment. Faced with a total claim of about $100,000, they sought help but were rebuffed by my father's relatives and mocked by my mother's relatives, who said, "We cannot lend such a large amount to a liar." My parents and Flora continued to blame me repeatedly. They called me ungrateful and labeled me a failure. I am not afraid of my family who recklessly shouts to take responsibility for ruining their lives. The child who once cried, wanting to be loved as part of the family, no longer exists. When my father, veins bulging on his forehead, yelled about suing and demanded that I take responsibility to solve it if I did not want to pay, I calmly asked him, specifically, how? He reacted. "Exactly how do you intend to sue me?" I continued. "Well, that's," he stammered, and my mother and Flora tried to speak, but no words came out. "How can you sue someone who you ignored as a child and treated as dead as an adult?" I challenged. They were speechless. "Perhaps I should be the one to sue. Do you want me to increase the compensation?" I pressed further, and they choked on their words in frustration. Whether they will actually sue remains uncertain, but it likely serves as a deterrent. The broken engagement and police incident caused by my family's misbehavior are now widely known at my father's workplace, threatening his professional status. The people who once drove me to utter fear were now merely foolish and pitiable figures to me. It was not time that resolved the issues, but rather that their values became relative as I grew up, and they no longer had any effect on me. My family stopped seeing me merely as a source of money when they nearly depleted their savings for retirement. It was a bitter choice for them, and an unavoidable action. At one time, my sister Flora, whom my parents were proud of, now had a tarnished reputation and was shunned by society. The way my parents were baffled by her behavior clearly shows how vain their expectations were. Once the center of her own world, seemingly stable in her self-centeredness, her foundation had crumbled, and her temperament had become rough and unstable. If they could honestly acknowledge their mistakes and sincerely attempt to improve, there might still be a chance for them to start over. However, it is highly doubtful that they can develop such humility. In these challenging circumstances, I have made the decision to take a new step in my life. I quit my job and moved to a tranquil rural town with my beloved grandmother. In this town, I found a job at a small but warm company, and I live a peaceful and fulfilling life with my grandmother. Our serene life, shared through blog and Instagram posts as an illustrated diary, has gradually gained attention. Many people comment that they find healing in the cozy daily life with my grandmother, and I have amassed tens of thousands of followers. There is also talk of publishing the diary, and I live my days in a dreamlike state due to these unexpected developments. "Your drawings really warm my heart," my grandmother said, stroking my head with her unchanged warm hand as she used to. While gaining social recognition was gratifying, seeing my grandmother smile is my greatest joy. I am deeply grateful to be able to share this happiness. I truly feel fortunate to have been born into this life. It's embarrassing for a waitress like you to come to the rehearsal dinner. Don't you dare show up at the wedding, and don't call me father if you're brazen enough to come. Hearing that, I felt nothing but ice in my heart. My father's words echoed repeatedly, cutting deeper with each repetition. My name is Alexandra. I'm 32 years old and live in an upscale neighborhood just outside Boston. Every morning I brew a cup of freshly roasted coffee after my run, check the weather report on my phone, and walk to my sleek office building nearby. My heart swells with quiet pride as I enter. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Nextstream, a subscription service company I built from scratch in a garage with college friends. My family never understood my vision. The pain of my parents' indifference still stings when I think about it. To them, I've always been the peculiar younger daughter who frustratingly dressed too simply, rarely bothered with makeup, and was constantly buried in my laptop or rushing between meetings. Eleanor, my older sister, makes my parents' eyes light up with joy. She's 3 years older than me and embodies their perfect daughter, gorgeous, elegant, and captivating. In family photos, I feel like a ghost hovering in Eleanor's radiant glow. During holiday gatherings, relatives cluster around her, gushing with admiration. "Eleanor, that dress looks absolutely stunning on you." Or, "Eleanor, your fiancé's an investment banker? How impressive." My chest tightens when my parents turn to me, if they remember I exist at all, with a dismissive "Alexandra? Oh, she's a waitress or something." They speak as if I'm merely an afterthought, a trivial footnote in our family story. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, if I silently shouldered the burden behind the scenes, my parents would finally see my worth and beam with pride, just as they do with Eleanor. But no, the spotlight, the expectations, the endless praise. They've always belonged to her alone. My stomach knots when I remember how my parents labeled me as distant, dry, difficult to talk to. The bitter truth is they never knew I stayed at the office until midnight resolving a crisis for a project worth $2 million. They never asked how it felt to build a company valued at over $100 million with 3 college friends. When people ask about my family, I force a smile that doesn't reach my eyes and say, "We haven't spoken in a while." My voice catches slightly, not because I'm hiding anything, but because there's simply nothing left to say. The only one among my relatives who acknowledged my existence was my aunt, Martha. She was also the only one who recognized my work. Eventually, the family that had been connected by such a thin thread completely shattered at my sister's wedding rehearsal dinner. It was early April. My heart was racing with excitement. I'd just secured a massive funding round with New York investors. I planned to take 3 days off and drive 8 hours to help with Eleanor's wedding rehearsal dinner, just as I always showed up for family events. When I called midway through my journey, my father Robert answered. My stomach fluttered nervously. "I'm already on my way down. Need me to pick up anything special?" I asked cheerfully. I can still hear his voice, not angry, but strangely detached. He paused, then cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Alexandra, if possible, don't come to Eleanor's rehearsal dinner." I felt like I'd been slapped. My knuckles turned white around the steering wheel as I pulled over, thinking maybe he was concerned about my busy schedule. "It's fine, Dad. I've already arranged everything at work. I really want to be there for Eleanor." This time his voice turned icy. "Eleanor is bringing Jared. He's an investment banker. Articulate, obviously successful. Your job, well, it seems like you're some sort of waitress. You showing up would just create uncomfortable comparisons, so it's better if you stay away." My blood froze in my veins. A painful chill shot through my body as tears burned behind my eyes. I gripped the phone so tightly my fingers ached and hissed, "Are you saying I embarrass the family? That I shouldn't attend because I'm some kind of disappointment?" He didn't backpedal. Instead, he twisted the knife deeper. "If you insist on coming, don't call me your father. And don't show up at the wedding either." Then silence. The call ended just like that, with no hesitation on his end. My car felt suffocatingly small. The coffee in my travel mug had gone cold. I stared through the windshield, feeling like my entire world had shattered with those few cruel words. I didn't sob. I just sat motionless, suddenly understanding with crystal clarity I was no longer welcome in the family I'd tried so desperately to please. I examined my shaking hands. They weren't trembling from rage, but from something far more profound. My breaking point had arrived. I had always believed that even if I'd never be cherished like Eleanor, I was still their daughter. The painful truth crushed me. I wasn't. I traveled back the way I came for hours, carrying wounded feelings with nowhere to go. When I got home, I decided to check my emails to switch to work mode and calm my heart. I opened my laptop and checked the company's executive briefings. One subject line immediately captured my attention: investment banker transfer to Boston office, portfolio review pending. I opened the attached document, scanning the names until I froze at one in particular. Jared Mitchell. My pulse quickened as recognition dawned. Just days ago, my mother Diane gushed about him. Eleanor's fiancé Jared works at a prestigious investment firm. I examined the file more closely. Current position, Managing Director, New York office, evaluating Nextstream's portfolio for potential investment. Approval required, Alexandra Warren, CEO and founder. A surprised laugh escaped my lips as my thoughts drifted to Jared, Eleanor's fiancé, and potentially my company's newest investment partner. The delicious irony made me laugh out loud. My family had explicitly barred me from Eleanor's wedding events because of him, while he was about to seek my approval for a multi-million-dollar portfolio investment. If life were a Broadway comedy, this would be the standing ovation moment. I returned to my office and opened the email again. The subject line practically sparkled on my screen: investment portfolio review, Jared Mitchell seeking partnership with Nextstream. I clicked his profile, absorbing every detail. Everything aligned perfectly. Age, credentials, experience, a meticulously curated resume. Precisely what would impress Eleanor? Ivy League educated, established, impeccably polished on paper. I studied his photograph, feeling a flicker of recognition. Memory suddenly surfaced. We'd briefly connected at a tech conference 6 months ago. He had firmly shaken my hand, respectfully addressing me, but neither of us made the familial connection. Or rather, I'd never cared enough about Eleanor's romantic life to recognize the man photographed beside her. Now I faced a choice: approve the investment meeting or decline it. But deep down, I knew I needn't interfere. Fate had crafted the perfect narrative. I simply needed to wait and watch what would unfold when Eleanor discovered her precious fiancé needed her embarrassing sister's approval for his career-making deal. 2 days later, Jared arrived at Nextstream headquarters. He clutched a leather portfolio. His expression was composed yet subtly nervous as he professionally entered my corner office. When I looked up from my desk, he smiled politely but showed no sign of recognizing me. "Ms. Warren, nice to meet you." "I'm Jared Mitchell," he introduced himself courteously. "Thank you for your time today." I displayed a measured smile, completely calm and composed. "Welcome to Nextstream. I'll personally review your investment proposal this quarter. Please have a seat." After sitting down, he began some light small talk, perhaps to ease his tension. "Actually, it's an interesting coincidence, but my fiancé's sister also has the same name, Alexandra." I showed interest and replied, "Is that so?" "Yes," he continued with a slight laugh. "But she's completely different from you. According to my future in-laws, she's a bit odd and apparently works as a waitress or something. I've never met her, but her parents and my fiancé talk about her that way at family gatherings." He laughed lightly. "Alexandra is a wonderful name. But you, a successful female CEO, and my future sister-in-law seem to be from completely different worlds." While maintaining my smile, I calmly replied, "People are all different even with the same name." "May I see your investment proposal?" Noticing the change in conversation flow, he quickly returned to business mode. "Of course," he said while taking out documents from his portfolio. I transitioned to business talk and asked detailed questions about his company's investment strategy. As the meeting drew to a close, I slid a confidentiality agreement toward him. "You'll need to sign this. For future developments," I said in a calm voice. He took the document and found the signing section on the last page. There it clearly stated Alexandra Warren, CEO founder. He paused for a moment, stared at the signature line, then looked up at my face. "Alexandra Warren," he repeated the words, and something seemed to slowly connect in his mind. "Could it be?" I said nothing, just maintained a calm expression. His face was drained of color, and his expression changed to fear and confusion when a wave of understanding hit him. "You're Eleanor's sister?" he barely managed to say. I just nodded. Jared signed the contract with visibly trembling fingers and quietly left without being able to say anything. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair as emotions swirled within me. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't bitter. I simply felt the universe readjusting, justice gently restoring balance. And I didn't need to say a single unkind word. The truth eloquently spoke for itself. 2 days before the wedding, I was checking my emails while drinking my morning coffee as usual. That's when an unexpected message popped up. It was from the PR team. "Alexandra, you're on the cover of the latest Forbes issue. The title is The Quiet Revolutionary Shaking Silicon Valley. The digital version is already online." My heart raced. I remembered doing an interview 3 months ago, but I didn't expect to be on the cover. The article focused on Nextstream's rapid growth and my management philosophy, especially introducing me as a female CEO who built a $100 million tech company hidden behind a modest appearance. That afternoon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. At first, it was congratulatory messages from business associates, but soon unexpected numbers started contacting me. The first message from my mother, Alexandra, I saw the latest edition of Forbes." "Is this true?" "Then my dad left a voicemail message. Call me back immediately." "It's important." A series of texts from Eleanor followed. "Why didn't you say anything?" $100 million? Jared saw it, and he's completely shocked. I didn't respond. I felt a strange sense of peace in the fact that they had finally discovered my true self. In the evening, I received a video call request from Aunt Martha. When I accepted, the screen showed not just her, but my entire family gathered in the living room. Their expressions varied shock, confusion, and above all, regret. "Alexandra," my mom began in a trembling voice. "Why didn't you tell us?" I responded calmly. "I tried to tell you all many times, but no one would listen." A new face appeared on the screen. It was Jared, with the same perfect suit and refined expression as his professional profile. He stared at the screen and blurted out almost uncontrollably, "Alexandra?" Everyone fell silent. "Are you really Alexandra Warren, the founder of Nextstream whom I met the other day?" I nodded, not wavering my gaze. After a long silence, Jared began speaking to everyone in the room. "She is my potential investment partner, and her approval is necessary for our company's portfolio acquisition." A stunned silence enveloped them. Eleanor's jaw visibly dropped. My parents stood motionless. No one uttered a word. Eleanor remained silent, her face pale. "Will you come to the wedding tomorrow?" Dad suddenly asked. "I think the whole family should be together." Aunt Martha's eyes met mine, sending a subtle warning. "I didn't receive an invitation," I answered calmly. "A week ago, you told me, if you insist on coming, don't call me your father." Silence fell. He tried to say something, but Mom grabbed his arm. "It was a big misunderstanding," she said. "Of course you're invited. Let's talk tomorrow." I nodded and ended the call, saying good night. The next morning, the doorbell rang. Looking through the peephole, I saw Mom standing alone. She was more well-groomed than usual and held a small package. I opened the door and invited her in. Entering the living room, she looked around my penthouse and let out a sigh of amazement. "This is amazing, Alexandra," she said. "Really wonderful." I said nothing, offering her coffee. She accepted it and sat on the sofa. "I read the Forbes article," she began. "We didn't know what you had accomplished." Robert, I, and Eleanor, she seemed to be searching for words. "We completely misunderstood you." She opened the package and took out a formal invitation to Eleanor's wedding. "Eleanor really wants you to come," she said, her voice suddenly sweet. "It would be wonderful if you could attend tomorrow's wedding as a guest of honor." Jared's entire family has seen the article. They're looking forward to meeting you. I took the invitation and traced the fold with my finger. "Why the sudden change?" I asked. She smiled and tried to take my hand. "I didn't move. You've always been special, Alexandra. We just couldn't understand." "You didn't want to understand," I quietly corrected. She flinched for a moment, then quickly regained her composure. "Will you come tomorrow?" "Eleanor is very worried." "It's her special day." I stared at the invitation and made my decision. "I'll come." Her face brightened with relief. "Wonderful. Of course, if you need anything like a dress, I'll arrange it." "I'm fine," I said. "I'll arrange everything myself." On Eleanor's wedding day, I arrived as scheduled, but in a way no one expected. A gleaming white Rolls-Royce Phantom glided up to the venue, and my driver came out to open my door. I was dressed in a simple yet elegant designer dress, holding a small attach case engraved with the Nextstream logo, Guests noticed my arrival, and whispers spread throughout the venue. "That's the woman from the Forbes cover. She's the CEO of Nextstream. She's Eleanor's sister." As I approached the entrance, my parents rushed to greet me. Their smiles were tight, their eyes anxious. "Alexandra, we're glad you came," Mom said, pretending to kiss my cheek. "What a wonderful car." "It's a company car," I replied. "We have several for the executive team." Dad tried to escort me to the front row of the wedding, but I politely declined. During the ceremony, I sat quietly, watching the proceedings. But when it came time for photographs, Eleanor's friends began to gather around me, asking questions about the tech industry and my management style. This was supposed to be Eleanor's day to shine, but suddenly the focus shifted to me. After the reception began and the toast speeches ended, Eleanor approached my table. Her expression was stern, and her voice was kept low. "Why now, at this time?" she said bitingly. "It's my special day. But everyone's just talking about Alexandra Warren, Forbes cover, $100 million company. Were you planning this too? To steal the spotlight from me?" Many of the guests began to notice our tense dialogue, and part of the venue grew quiet. I answered in a calm voice. "Let's talk for a moment," I said. I opened the attaché case, took out some documents and placed them on the table, visible for anyone to see. "These are records of the family bills I've been paying every month for the past 2 years. I showed the first folder. A total of $16,720. Next, I took out another folder. This is the recording and transcript of the phone call, where Dad excluded me from the rehearsal dinner and wedding. Finally, I took out a copy of the Forbes article and the investment proposal from Jared's company seeking my approval. "I didn't come here out of anger or for revenge," I said calmly. "I just want you to recognize the truth. I've been here all along. In plain sight. But no one wanted to see." Noticing what was put on the table and the serious development, the room fell completely silent. Eleanor began to cry as Mom collapsed into a chair. "Why?" Dad began, but couldn't finish his words. "By your standards, I was never enough," I said. "From today, I'll live by my own standards." "That's enough," Jarrett suddenly said in a firm voice. He turned to me and took a deep breath. "Alexandra, I want to sincerely apologize. When I heard about you as my future sister-in-law, I had a completely wrong impression. I'm ashamed that I judged you based on that." The venue fell silent, and all eyes were on us. "I respect what you've built," he continued. "And most importantly, your dignity. Seeing the unfair treatment you've endured all along, I've made a decision." He turned to Eleanor and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm breaking off our engagement. Our fundamental values are too different." Gasps echoed throughout the venue, and Eleanor's face was drained of color. Mom leaned against her chair, and Dad was speechless. Jared turned to me again and said, "Thank you for teaching me what true success is," before leaving the venue. I stood there, confused by the sudden events yet feeling an inner peace. Amidst this commotion, I hadn't said a single word in retaliation. I simply revealed the truth peacefully. Sometimes the most eloquent response is to simply exist and be yourself. Later that night, my phone chimed with my mother's first message. It was a lengthy, chaotic blend of fury and desperation. "You deliberately let this happen during Eleanor's wedding day. She hasn't stopped crying. Dad is completely shocked. Don't you think that was unbelievably cruel, Alexandra?" I watched her words appear on my screen, but didn't immediately respond. Instead, I prepared a cup of artisanal herbal tea and settled into my designer sofa, allowing the fragrant steam to soothe the tightness constricting my throat. I felt neither triumph nor remorse. After thoughtful consideration, I finally composed a reply, brief and direct, "You claim I was cruel?" If a single moment of truth was sufficient to destroy her entire wedding, perhaps that marriage was never built on anything substantial to begin with. I pressed send, completely indifferent about receiving a response. 30 minutes later, my phone vibrated again. This time from my father. "I never imagined you would choose such a vindictive way to punish the family." I closed my eyes and sank deeper into my chair. Punishment? Is that genuinely how they interpreted my actions? My mind was flooded with memories of being explicitly excluded from a family celebration, having my identity as their daughter dismissed because my career wasn't prestigious enough in their academic circles. I remembered years of desperately seeking acceptance and love. Those efforts were officially over. Near midnight, an email arrived from Jared. "Alexandra, I sincerely apologize for not recognizing your position sooner. I deeply respect your professional accomplishments and your dignified silence today. I've never felt more embarrassed, though certainly not because of you." After reading his words, I thoughtfully composed my reply. "Jared, no apology is necessary. Everyone bears responsibility for how they perceive others. Rest assured, I never allow family dynamics to influence business decisions. But I hope you now understand sometimes maintaining silence demonstrates the greatest strength." I sent the message, powered down my device, and placed it face down on my marble coffee table. Tomorrow, I will continue my normal routine at Nextstream headquarters. Reports would need reviewing, meetings would require preparation, and life would proceed as usual. With one significant difference: beginning today, those who had consistently dismissed me finally recognized who I truly was. Without raising my voice, without making accusations, I had rendered them speechless. A week after the wedding, as my daily routine began to return, a delivery person brought a thick envelope to the door of my luxury apartment one morning. While looking at the sender, it was my parents' address. Opening the envelope, I found a handwritten letter spanning several pages. My mother's elegant handwriting conveyed emotional words. "Dear Alexandra, you can't imagine how much courage it took to write this letter. Since the wedding, our world has completely changed. Aunt Martha won't speak to us. Now she has declared she won't even host the annual family Christmas gathering and has told the truth to all our relatives. Robert's university colleagues have begun to distance themselves from him after reading that article. Many of them, it turns out, have been using your company's services. They say, 'We didn't know that famous Alexandra Warren was your daughter.' They all know that Robert has been talking about you as the failed strange daughter all this time. Now that they know about your success, they are shocked that your father had no grasp of who his daughter was and had treated you so dismissively. Our longtime friends have also left. There are no more dinner invitations, and we've been excluded from social circles. We have suddenly fallen from the social status we had built. The most painful part is Eleanor's condition. She has barely left her bed since the broken engagement. She is examining herself for the first time and is ashamed of her self-centered attitude. Why didn't I notice Alexandra's struggles? She cried last night. I thought she was jealous of me. But actually, I was privileged and blind. Since you were a child, we never tried to understand you. Instead of recognizing your unique talents and passions, we tried to force you into a mold like Eleanor's. Even when you became successful, we couldn't acknowledge it. Robert and I replay every conversation with you each night, realizing how cold and indifferent we were. Never saying thank you despite you continuing to send money. Feeling ashamed of your career because it was difficult to explain. Never being there when you needed support. We may have done irreparable damage. But if it's still possible, please give us a chance to start over. We want to rebuild trust over time and truly understand and respect who you are. from your parents. There was also a postscript from my father. His firm handwriting had lost its usual confidence. Alexandra, my pride destroyed our relationship. What I should have been most proud of, I was most ashamed of. Now, I've lost my academic position and the respect of my colleagues. But those things aren't important. What I've truly lost is my relationship with my daughter. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just consider giving us another chance to start over. I read the letter over and over, feeling something within me finally being released. I took no joy in their suffering, but there was a kind of peace. For a long time, I had craved their recognition. Now they could see me. But I no longer needed their approval. A few days later, I wrote a simple reply, "Dear Mom and Dad, thank you for your letter. It pains me to hear about the pain you're experiencing. But now I understand the importance of knowing my worth and protecting it. For years, I made myself smaller, trying to meet your expectations. But now I understand that setting boundaries to protect my worth isn't selfish, but growth. Please pass on a message from me to Eleanor. I understand her pain. The journey of self-reflection is difficult but necessary. She will find her own path. As I did. I will continue walking my own path now. Perhaps in the future, our paths may cross again. But for now we need time apart. With love, Alexandra." I mailed my reply and moved forward. Occasionally I think of my family, but there's no more pain. Just a quiet understanding. Both they and I are facing the consequences of our actions. I am complete, successful, and fulfilled without them. I keep in touch with Aunt Martha, and we occasionally have lunch. She understands that I don't want to talk about the family and instead talks about my company and future plans. Through her, I learned that Eleanor is slowly recovering and beginning to find her passion. Ironically, she has started an internship at a small tech startup. Most importantly, I found my own voice and vowed never to silence it again. My story might help someone find the courage to stand up and declare, "I am here, and I am worthy." Sometimes, the quietest voices carry the most powerful messages. The resignation letter I was holding was gleaming white in the morning sun. I had made the decision to leave the insurance company where I had worked for 30 years. The significance of this decision quietly stirred my heart. Is this really okay? As I was organizing my desk, a younger colleague of mine, whose face was filled with concern, approached me. She was a subordinate whom I had cherished since she was a new employee. "Yes, I've made up my mind." I smiled calmly. The 30 years I spent at this company. I remember the day I joined at 22 as if it were yesterday. I joined this company filled with hope. The following 30 years were truly days of tumultuous changes. As the wave of digitization surged, the insurance industry underwent significant transformations. Paper files were replaced by databases, and face-to-face contracts transitioned to online. I adapted to numerous regulatory reforms and overcame the turbulent waves of corporate mergers. Through these processes, I too grew. I shifted from a general position to a comprehensive one, became a team leader, and finally ascended to become the first female sales manager. It was never an easy journey. There were days I worked until late at night, nights I remade documents while shedding tears, and times I fought against discrimination. However, all these experiences shaped who I am today. Many people say it's too early to retire at 52. Certainly, I could have aimed higher in my career, but my heart was already moving towards the next stage. When asked why now, I showed them a photo of my parents. Their smiling faces, now in their mid-70s. Behind those smiles, I could clearly see certain things. The way my father's steps were becoming less certain, how my mother's fatigue was deepening day by day. The old family home has become too much of a burden for them. Steep stairs, narrow corridors, and an inconvenient bathroom. All of these were becoming shackles for my aging parents. I'm thinking of remodeling the house. When I conveyed my intention to retire, the president stared into my eyes. Losing someone as capable as you is a great loss for the company. However, I respect your decision. His words warmed my heart. The time I spent at the company was never wasted. Rather, it has become a significant asset supporting my current decision. With my severance pay, I plan to completely remodel my parents' home and live with them. The house my parents live in was originally built by my grandparents. I own it, having inherited it as an estate, but it was far from my workplace, so my parents were living there. When I discussed the remodeling plans, my husband immediately agreed. He is a mild-mannered engineer who loves my parents as if they were his own. On holidays, he plays chess with my father and genuinely praises my mother's cooking. His kindness further supported my decision. I want to cherish the time with my parents. I want to make their remaining days as happy as possible. This desire was born from pure love. I will use everything I learned at the company for my family now. My career is moving to a new stage. The estimate for the remodeling work arrived 2 weeks after my retirement. The moment I opened the envelope, I was stunned by the amount, which was much higher than expected. It seems that transforming a 40-year-old wooden house into a modern living space costs more than imagined. As my husband and I reviewed the estimate, we read through each item. Foundation work, seismic reinforcement, replacing insulation, making it barrier-free, completely renewing the water facilities. All of these were essential renovations. The architect explained everything carefully. Considering your parents' age, the design should be adaptable for future caregiving. We're planning to widen the corridors, eliminate steps, and consider locations for handrails. Indeed, that was necessary. Even though my parents are healthy now, they might need care someday. We need to prepare thoroughly now for that time. Most of our retirement pay will be used up, won't it? My husband's words made me feel a bit sad. Originally, we thought about using the retirement pay for a trip around the world. But now, there's something more important. That's fine. This is an investment in the future of our entire family. The construction began in May. First, we had to clear out all the items in the house. During that time, my parents stayed at our place. We would have breakfast together, my mother would help with dinner preparations, and my father would play chess with my husband while watching TV. Such ordinary daily life inflated my expectations for a new lifestyle. I'm really sorry. It must be such an inconvenience for you. As she spoke, my mother was washing dishes in the kitchen. I embraced her shoulders from behind. Mom, it's not an inconvenience at all. In fact, I'm happy we can spend this time together. The construction proceeded as planned. Old walls were removed, new pillars were erected, and floors were replaced. Every weekend, we went to check on the progress of the construction. However, there was one thing that concerned me: my brother's behavior. Since the construction began, he had started visiting the site unusually often. Not just on weekends, but I would also see him there on weekday evenings. He would intently look over the blueprints and ask questions to the workers. At first glance, it seemed like the natural behavior of a son concerned about his family home. But something felt off. He has seemed different lately. One day, I decided to bring it up with my mother. Her expression seemed to cloud over for a moment. Well, there are various things going on. She didn't elaborate further, but it was clear that something was happening. I had a chance to meet my brother's wife, Kathy, and she also seemed to be hiding something. By the 3rd month, the construction was taking shape. A bright, open living room, wide corridors easy to navigate with a wheelchair, and a bathroom with handrails. We planned to set up my parents' bedroom on the 1st floor and use the 2nd floor for ourselves. The workmanship is wonderful, said the architect, looking pleased. Indeed, the finish was better than expected. Yet somehow a corner of my heart remained uneasy. my brother's behavior, the subtle changes in my parents' demeanor, the words Kathy almost said. Only 2 more weeks until the house renovation is completed. While my heart swelled with dreams of a new life with my parents, a nagging unease that I was overlooking something important wouldn't leave me. At night, I confided in my husband in our bedroom. "I feel a bit uneasy." He closed his book and looked at me seriously. "I've been concerned too. The recent behavior of your brother. It seems like he's up to something." His words turned my unease into conviction. But surely I wanted to believe my family wouldn't betray me. In August, the remodeling was completed. The architect, satisfied with the final inspection, handed me the keys. "The finish is excellent. I'm sure you'll make wonderful memories here," he said. As I listened to his words, I walked through the newly renovated house. Bright sunlight streamed through the large windows, softly illuminating the white walls. The spacious living room was laid with warm flooring chosen by my parents, and the kitchen was equipped with fixtures thoughtfully designed for my mother's use. Most of our retirement fund had been invested, but it was well worth it. We should be able to move in next weekend. I discussed with my husband as we toured the rooms, talking about our future life. My parents liked the new home, especially my mother, who was looking forward to cooking in the new kitchen. However, this peaceful expectation would crumble in just one day. The next afternoon, when I went to the house for a final check, I saw an unfamiliar large truck parked in front of the house from a distance. As I approached, I realized it was a moving company's truck. That's strange. Our move isn't scheduled until later. When my husband parked the car on the shoulder, I also noticed my brother's black SUV. A foreboding feeling ran through me. As I walked towards the entrance, passing workers carrying in cardboard boxes, I opened the door to an unexpected scene. My brother's wife, Kathy, was organizing boxes. Unfamiliar furniture was already placed in the living room, and her preferred kitchen tools lined the kitchen. "Oh, Kathy." Kathy noticed me and made a troubled yet slightly defiant expression. Her appearance, with a high-end brand bag slung over her shoulder and perfect makeup, was like she owned the place. "What is going on here?" My words trailed off as my mother came down the stairs. Her usually gentle eyes now harbored an unfamiliar coldness. "I'm sorry, but they have nowhere else to go." Her voice sounded more like justification than apology. My brother's suspicious behavior, my parents' evasive attitudes, Kathy's half-spoken words. All the pieces fell into a terrifying puzzle. "Wait. This is my house. My retirement fund. No, that's not right." My mother's voice resonated unusually strongly. "This is our family's home. It's just the 2 of you, but your brother has children, and besides." She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "You are still young, so you can save up again. Your brother doesn't have that kind of time." At that moment, something inside me froze. The calm I had cultivated over 30 years of corporate life shattered in an instant. My brother descended the stairs and declared with a domineering tone, "It's already decided. Dad and I have settled it." "What do you mean?" Turning around, I saw my father standing with documents in hand. "The transfer of ownership is already complete, without your consent." His voice had the coldness of reprimanding subordinates at the company. "But that's illegal. Legalities don't apply to family matters. And," my father smirked, "I can prepare your signature anytime I need." At those words, I felt the blood drain from my face. They forged my signature. I couldn't believe they would go that far. "Mother, this is fraud," my husband said quietly yet firmly. "Legally, the owner of this house is—" "Shut up," my brother shouted angrily. "You wouldn't understand. I have a responsibility to support my family. I don't have a carefree life like yours." Kathy smirked meaningfully as she took out her smartphone. "I can shoot cooking videos that will look great on Instagram in the new kitchen. My followers will love it." The life I dreamed of with my family was crumbling before my eyes. In its place, a scene filled with arrogance and greed was unfolding. Get out. My voice was colder than I expected. Leave this house right now. My mother laughed nervously, trying to smooth things over. Now, don't get so worked up. All of this is for your benefit. For my benefit. I couldn't help but laugh. For 30 years, I've worked desperately at the company. Overtime, working on holidays, promotion exams. I dreamed of a new life with the retirement pay I finally received. But you, if it's about money. My brother pulled out several $100 bills from his wallet. Isn't this enough? Isn't your feeling worth just this much? His arrogant attitude made me lose my last bit of reason. The movers continued to bring in their belongings indifferently to the family drama unfolding. I took out my mobile phone, my hand trembling. I'm calling the police. My husband put his hand on my shoulder. His warmth was barely keeping me together. Wait! My mother waved her hands frantically. If the neighbors find out about the police, if you cared about the neighbors' eyes, you shouldn't have illegally entered someone else's home in the first place. My father stepped forward and lowered his voice. Think about it. Who should live in this house, you and your husband, or your brother and his family with the grandchildren? Which makes more sense? His words carried the authority of a father who had held sway for years, but that no longer worked on me. Make sense? How does trampling over my life make sense? I took out my mobile phone and dialed 911. Wait! My mother's scream echoed. You are no longer a member of this family. So I finally hear the truth. As I made the call, I stared back at my mother. So this is your true face. As I started to hear the sirens of a police car approaching, the expressions on my family's faces changed. I felt the illusion of 30 years crumbling down with a crash. 2 weeks after the betrayal was uncovered, I spent sleepless nights. Whenever I closed my eyes, the scenes from that day replayed. My parents' words, my brother's shouts, Kathy's challenging expression, and their belongings, brought in one after another. It's just a temporary measure. That was what my parents claimed. They said that my brother and his wife were facing a crisis in their marriage and were financially strained. Therefore, they wanted to let them stay temporarily in the new house. However, their behavior did not seem temporary. That's clearly wrong. Megan, my best friend, said with a stern expression as we sat in our usual cafe. She has known me since our days at the insurance company, and she knows everything about my 30-year career and my family relations. It's the retirement pay you worked 30 years for. It's essentially your entire life. Megan's words were sharp, yet they precisely struck my heart. Indeed, that house is not just any building. It represents the culmination of my 30 years of labor and my hope for a new life with my parents. Growing up, our family was never wealthy, but we always had a caring heart for each other. At least, that's what I believed. This isn't about love. Megan gripped my hand tightly. It's a fraud. Your kindness is being exploited. You should take legal action. That night, I had a long discussion with my husband. I understand how you feel, he said, holding my shoulder. But if we stay silent, your life will be ruined. Our lives will be ruined. The next morning, I made up my mind. I booked an appointment with Mr. Simpson, a real estate lawyer. His office was located on the 15th floor of a skyscraper in New York City. On the solid wooden desk, records from the past 2 months were spread out chronologically. Let's organize your case, Mr. Simpson said as he adjusted his silver-rimmed glasses, carefully verifying each fact one by one. First, your retirement pay from 30 years of service. What's the exact amount? $320,000. The moment I uttered that number, the weight of 30 years welled up inside me. Overtime, working on holidays, studying for promotions. All my efforts were condensed into that amount. Mr. Simpson pulled a contract from a blue file. The document, signed 3 months ago, was still new, and their unlawful occupation. the illegal residency of your brother's family, plus the forgery of your signature. He calmly analyzed each fact. Having over 30 years of experience as a lawyer, Mr. Simpson himself brought a sense of reassurance. In conclusion, he took off his glasses and looked directly at me. Their claims have no legal basis. Rather, this is a case that could potentially lead to criminal charges for fraudulent behavior. At those words, I involuntarily gasped. Criminal charges. Against my parents. Yes. Attempting to deceive you out of a significant asset like a residence is a clear crime. However, Mr. Simpson continued quietly while looking out the window. Let's keep that as a last resort. First, we aim to resolve this in a civil way. That evening, I received a briefing on the specific legal procedures. The first step was to stop their unjust occupation with a preliminary injunction. Following that was a lawsuit to confirm the ownership of the house. Depending on the situation, we might also consider claims for emotional distress. It will take about 2 weeks to prepare. Document creation, evidence organization, submission to the court. Mr. Simpson chose his words carefully. During that time, is there a chance they might leave voluntarily? I responded with a wry smile. Unlikely. If anything, they'll entrench themselves further, especially my brother. My prediction was spot on. The day after we filed the petition for a preliminary injunction, an infuriated call came from my brother. Are you suing your own family? His voice was trembling. With anger or perhaps fear. If your family, why did you try to take my house? I have a family too, kids. You wouldn't understand. His words brought all the anger I had harbored for 30 years to the surface. Right. I don't understand. I don't understand trampling over someone else's life. For 30 years, brother, I worked hard and saved that retirement pay, and with it, the life of 30 years I remodeled that house. After hanging up the phone, my hands were shaking. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but there was no turning back. The hearing at the court was set for the end of September. In the dim courtroom of the New York District Court, I faced my family. My mother was dressed in black, crying throughout. Why would you do something so terrible? My mother appealed to familial affection and occasionally sobbed quietly. My father, sitting upright, emphasized the moral perspective. Parent-child bonds should not be like this. My brother cited financial hardship and brought up his children's future. However, the judge's demeanor was composed throughout the trial. She was a middle-aged female judge who occasionally took notes while methodically advancing the proceedings. I will judge from a legal perspective. At those words, I could feel my family's emotional arguments crumbling one after another. The examination of evidence proceeded swiftly. Records of the pension transfer, the original contract, and numerous threatening messages they had sent. Each piece of evidence was clearly recognized. As October began, we awaited the verdict. Meanwhile, the pressure from my family continued. There were phone calls trying to persuade me from my father's brother. There were letters of criticism from relatives on my mother's side. Rumors were spreading around the neighborhood, and at times, we even received direct threats. If you go on like this, you will regret it, my father's message said, devoid of any previous warmth. Do you intend to leave your family destitute? I never thought you were so heartless. My mother's message on Messenger contained the usual conviction that they were in the right. During the 2 weeks waiting for the verdict, I questioned my decision every night. Even the decisiveness cultivated over 30 years of corporate life sometimes wavered when faced with family issues. But thankfully, my husband was always on my side. Every time he came home from work and saw me troubled, he repeated the same words. You're doing the right thing. Just because they're family, it doesn't mean you have to accept unreasonable demands. That's not love or devotion, it's just abusive control. Then, on the morning of October 15th, I received a call from Mr. Simpson. The verdict has been delivered. His voice conveyed a sure sense of resolution. On my way to his office, the sky was covered with gray clouds, and a cold autumn wind was blowing. As I stepped into the elevator, I took a deep breath. This verdict would forever change the relationship with my family. But perhaps it was an inevitable conclusion. 3 months after the verdict, in January 2025, I stood on the planned site of my new home. In a quiet suburban residential area, a huge land located a 15-minute walk from the station. Nearby, there was a 24-hour supermarket, and a lush park was within walking distance. "It looks like we can start a new life here," I murmured as my husband and I surveyed the vacant land. Just then, I noticed a familiar name on my smartphone screen. It was a message from my mother. "We need to talk. We can't pay the rent for the public housing we're living in." I sighed. 3 months after being forced to leave, my parents' and brother's living conditions were more dire than I had imagined. They had to live on the 4th floor of a municipal apartment building. The elevator had been out of order and left unfixed, and shopping required a 30-minute walk up a hillside path. My mother had interviewed for a part-time job at a nearby supermarket, but was rejected due to her age. Eventually, she could only manage to earn about $500 a month by distributing flyers. Recently, I heard from a former colleague of my father's that he visited the job center almost daily. However, there are hardly any companies willing to hire someone in their 70s. He was also turned down for a security guard job due to concerns about his physical strength. Messages from my mother kept coming regularly, but eventually stopped when I ignored them. Last week, I saw her by chance at the supermarket. She was rummaging through the discount bin for food close to its expiration date, a stark contrast to her former demeanor. When she spotted me, she quickly disappeared into another aisle. Her cart was piled with discounted food items. "About your parents," Megan told me some neighborhood gossip. "My parents couldn't live on their pension alone and were considering applying for welfare. They spend their nights in the dark to save on electricity bills," she said. My brother's downfall was even worse. His divorce from Kathy was finalized, and he was behind on child support payments. He was facing wage garnishment due to multiple credit card debts. Your brother was even fired from his convenience store job. Megan's information network was accurate. Apparently, he had been working the night shift at the register and was fired for being repeatedly late. Unable to find a new job, he was living reclusively at our parents' place. "Please, can you lend me just $500? My brother's calls were still mostly about asking for money. His voice was exhausted, and his once arrogant demeanor had faded. "We're not in that kind of relationship anymore." When I hung up the phone, something pained me deep inside. But this was the path they had chosen. While looking at the blueprints for the new house, I had many meetings with the architect. A 2-story house, with 4 individual rooms for international students on the 1st floor and a shared space. The 2nd floor would be our living space. My husband's proposal for a multicultural exchange type of a shared house opened the door to a new life. The new house was completed in April. Bright sunlight poured into the living room, with its warm wooden floors and spacious kitchen. Everything was ready to welcome a new family. 1 month after starting our new life, living with the international students was more fulfilling than I had expected. Anna's Pella, Wang's talks about architecture, Junko's Japanese paintings, and Pedro's entrepreneurial ideas. The dining table was filled with smiles and conversations. New family. I was gradually beginning to understand what that meant. Blood relations do not necessarily guarantee bonds. What matters is the heart that cares for each other. That doesn't necessarily mean always forgiving. Now my home is filled with the smiles of young people. There is the kindness of my husband. And there is new hope. I sometimes think of the hardships faced by my parents and brother, but that is the path they chose. And I am walking my own path. The words "Welcome to our home" displayed at the entrance shine in the morning sun, as if heralding the start of a new season. Why didn't you say anything until now?" My voice was trembling. My best friend Matilda, who I thought I could proudly say I'd shared 13 years of friendship with, couldn't look me in the eye. The stack of papers laid out on the kitchen table in her apartment was shaking the very foundation of my life. My name is Elsa Lee. I'm 35 years old and work as an accountant in Chicago. My father passed away from a heart attack 15 years ago, and about a year later, my mother remarried Edwin Lewis. Edwin was a colleague of my father's and had been a great support to both my mother and me during a difficult time. At least, that's what I had believed until today. "I thought I was doing it for you, Elsa," Matilda finally spoke. "But recently, I heard Edwin got involved in an investment scam. I couldn't stay silent any longer." The documents in front of me were records of the trust fund my father had left behind. It was supposed to have been given to me when I turned 21. $1.2 million. But my stepfather, Edwin, had managed it without ever telling me it existed for 14 years. What shocked me even more was the power of attorney document with my forged signature. It was dated just after I turned 18. Back then, I was desperately preparing for college, and I believed everything Edwin and my mother told me. "How did you find out?" I asked, lifting the papers with trembling hands. "You know my mother used to work at a law firm," Matilda explained quietly. "She noticed some of Edwin's fraudulent documents a few years ago, but he pressured her into silence. Before she passed away last month, she gave me this evidence." Matilda's mother, Natalie, was someone I had known as well. When she passed away suddenly from cancer, it had been a heavy blow to Matilda. And now, her death had brought a new truth to light. The room began to spin. In my head, the memories of the past 15 years started to rearrange like pieces of a puzzle. "Apply for scholarships, Elsa. You have to work hard if you want to achieve anything in life." I could clearly recall Edwin's words when I was preparing for college. Back then, I was juggling 3 part-time jobs and desperately searching for scholarships. In the mornings, I prepared the cafe for opening. During the day, I worked in the university library office. At night, I was a waitress at a restaurant. On weekdays, I worked 16 hours a day. Even on weekends, I didn't rest. I always slept less than 5 hours a night. All of it was so I could attend college and to help the household finances. Over and over again, I endured, even when I felt I might collapse. I believed in Edwin's lesson about the importance of succeeding on your own. Meanwhile, he and my mother had bought a new luxury SUV that same year and spent weekends at upscale golf courses. I never questioned it back then. I believed they've worked hard for many years, so they have the right to enjoy it. Keep the wedding modest. Luxury will be your downfall. That was Edwin's advice when I married Thomas 3 years ago. We held a small ceremony and kept our honeymoon modest. Thomas and I did all the preparations ourselves and had help from our friends. All of it was to avoid burdening the family. Right after the wedding, Edwin and my mother went on a European cruise. It was a special deal, just happened to be good timing, they said. Family is about supporting each other, Elsa. Someday when you need help, we'll be there for you. Last year, Edwin and my mother spoke to me about their anxieties about old age and asked for help in buying a new home. I gave them $50,000 from my savings, money I had slowly saved up through my work as an accountant. Thomas and I had to postpone buying our own house. I should have told you earlier, Matilda said with tears in her eyes. But I was scared of their threats. The truth is sometimes cruel. But what lay before me now wasn't just betrayal, it was calculated exploitation. Everything began to take on new meaning. When I chose to major in accounting in college, Edwin said, "It's great to have an accountant in the family." Looking back, he probably just wanted to reduce the chance of uncovering his fraud. That night, when I returned home, Thomas immediately noticed the look on my face. "What happened?" he asked with concern. After I finished telling him everything, his expression hardened with anger. "You have to sue him," he said without hesitation. "He stole from you. While you were juggling 3 part-time jobs to pay for school, he was living a luxurious life on your inheritance. But he raised me. He helped us after my father died," I protested weakly. "Raised you?" Thomas said in disbelief. "He stole your father's legacy, lived in luxury on your money, and lectured you about frugality while you were working yourself to exhaustion." His words were painfully true. But I still wasn't ready to accept such a deep betrayal. And the most painful part was the possibility that my mother might have been his accomplice. "I'll talk to a lawyer tomorrow," I decided. "But I still don't know if I'll sue." That night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I went to a law office. Through Matilda's referral, a sharp-eyed lawyer named Joyce Long took on my case. "This is a clear breach of fiduciary duty," Joyce said while reviewing the documents. "A forged signature, hidden assets, and false declarations. All of these could be grounds for criminal charges." "Criminal charges?" The words felt heavy. "Does that mean prison?" "There is a possibility," Joyce answered candidly. "At the very least, for financial fraud and forgery." My heart pounded violently. The thought of Edwin going to prison made my chest tighten. His crimes were unforgivable, but he had supported us during hard times and had become a father figure to me. And more than anything, I was worried about the impact on my mother. She seemed to love Edwin very much. "Is there any other option?" "A civil resolution," Joyce said quietly. "Demanding the return of the remaining trust funds and repayment of the misused assets." Joyce began to ask for more details about my situation. The hardships during college, balancing multiple part-time jobs while studying, and constantly being taught the importance of independence. "Elsa," Joyce said, looking up from the documents, "do you have records of all the tuition, housing, and living expenses you paid?" "I think I have most of them," I replied. "I kept detailed records of all my income and expenses for scholarship applications." "That's excellent," Joyce said. "Showing how much you paid and how hard you worked will make Edwin's deception even clearer. Despite the fact that you had assets, he forced you into excessive labor." I thought back to my records from college. My daily planner was filled with class schedules and work shifts. There were times I took naps in my car just to get 2 or 3 hours of sleep a week. Even when I was hospitalized from exhaustion, Edwin simply said, "This is part of life's education." By the time I left the office, I had made a decision. First, I would confront Edwin directly. Then, I would decide on my final course of action based on his response. And above all, I had to confirm the thing I feared most. Did my mother know? The next evening, Thomas and I visited Edwin and my mother's luxurious suburban home. "Are you ready?" Thomas asked as he parked the car. "No," I answered honestly. But the longer we wait, the worse it gets. When I knocked on the door, my mother answered. Her warm smile tore at my heart even more. "Elsa, Thomas. What a surprise. Is there a special reason for the visit?" "We need to talk," I said as calmly as I could. "Is Edwin home?" We were led into the living room, where Edwin was working on his laptop. He stood up to greet us. Always calm, always calculating. The man who supported my mother after my father's death, encouraged me, and now my life's greatest betrayer. "Elsa, Thomas," Edwin said with a smile. "Is something wrong?" "Something wrong?" My voice trembled slightly. "Yes, something's very wrong." I slowly took the documents out of my bag and spread them across the coffee table. "Can you explain this?" The moment he saw the papers, the color drained from Edwin's face. He glanced at my mother, then looked back at the documents. "Where did you?" "That's not important," I interrupted. "Why? Why did you hide it from me? Why did you keep using my money?" "Elsa, calm down," my mother interjected. "What are you talking about?" Seeing the confusion on her face gave me a sliver of hope. Maybe she really didn't know. "Edwin hid Dad's trust fund from me," I explained. $1.2 million, Mom. Money I was supposed to receive when I turned 21. Instead, he forged my signature and used it for 14 years. I continued. And I went through college working 3 part-time jobs. There were times I collapsed from exhaustion. "I thought you were teaching me independence," my voice trembled. "Meanwhile, you were playing golf and going on cruises using my money." My mother's face turned pale. She looked at Edwin, then back at me. That must be a mistake. Edwin wouldn't do something like that." "It's not a mistake," I said, my voice shaking. "I have all the evidence. A legal professional has reviewed everything." Edwin let out a deep sigh. "Elsa, listen," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Your father left me with a lot of responsibility. That included taking care of you and your mother. The trust fund, it's complicated." "Complicated?" Thomas said coldly. "Is fraud and theft complicated? While Elsa was working over 16 hours a day and breaking down from exhaustion to pay for school?" "We were just saving it for your future," Edwin defended. "You were too young to handle that kind of money at the time." "Oh, really?" I exploded in anger. "So while I was cutting back on sleep to keep working, you were buying new cars? While I had a modest wedding, you were off on a cruise?" My mother started to cry. "Elsa, we never meant for this to happen. I didn't know." "Don't lie, Grace," Edwin suddenly said in a cold voice. "You benefited just as much." Those words shattered my last hope. My mother had known. "There are 2 options," I said as I stood up. "First, full repayment of the remaining trust fund and all misused funds. Second, criminal prosecution." "This is blackmail," Edwin shouted. "No, this is reality," Thomas said quietly. "This is the consequence of what you did to Elsa." While she worked herself sick to pay for school, you lived in luxury on her account. You have 48 hours to decide, I said. If I don't hear from you by then, I'll pursue legal action. As we stepped outside, rain began to fall. It felt as though the sky mirrored my emotions. She knew, I sobbed in the car. Mom knew, she betrayed me too. Elsa, Thomas held me close. You're strong. You can get through this. He took my hand. They exploited you for years. They worked you until you collapsed. They stole every part of the legacy your father left you. But now it's time to end it. You're right, I said, wiping my tears. No one will ever exploit me again. On the way home, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk to her. That night, I listened to her voicemail. Elsa, please let me talk to you. At first, I didn't know. I thought Edwin was saving that money for you. I didn't learn the truth until years later, and, by then. Her voice broke. Please call me back. I ended the call. I loved my mother, and I knew she loved me too. But that love was now buried beneath betrayal. Images of myself in college came rushing back. Exhausted, collapsed from malnutrition and sleep deprivation, lying in a hospital bed. Still worried about my next shift. Was it all for nothing? Was it all a performance for the people who were stealing from me? I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. Tonight, like so many nights before, I knew I wouldn't sleep. But this time, it wasn't from exhaustion, it was from the pain of betrayal. 48 hours passed, but there was no word from Edwin. So as I began preparing to go to court, I received an unexpected visitor. My mother's sister, Aunt Liz. Elsa, we need to talk, she said with a grave expression. It's about Edwin. Unlike my mother, Lisa had always been honest and straightforward. She pulled an old envelope from her bag. This was entrusted to me by your father, Liz said. He told me, if anything happens, give this to Elsa. Inside the envelope were a handwritten letter from my father and a copy of the trust fund documents. My father had given clear instructions that the money be given to me when I turned 21. And he had warned not to place complete trust in Edwin. Why didn't you say anything until now? I asked, holding the letter with trembling hands. Your father made me promise, Liz explained. Unless something goes wrong, never speak of this envelope to anyone. Last week, Edwin called me about you. He's been spreading bad rumors about you to the relatives. When I heard that, I knew it was time to give this to you. With this new evidence, we began preparing to go to court. But the day before the filing, Joyce contacted us. There's been a settlement offer. What? Edwin's lawyer reached out. He agrees to return the remaining trust funds and repay 70% of the misused money within 3 years. Why the sudden change? Probably because he found out you have your father's letter, Joyce explained. That letter is damning evidence for him. Should I accept it? I think so, Joyce said. Trials are long and emotionally draining. This settlement is fair, and it allows you to move forward. There's one condition, I said with firm resolve. He must explain the truth to his friends. He must correct the lies he told and the damage he did to my image in writing. On the day of the signing, Edwin came to the law office. He appeared calm, but the tension in his eyes was unmistakable. "Elsa," he said in a hushed voice. "Can we talk? Just the two of us?" I looked at Joyce. She gave a small nod. In the adjacent conference room, Edwin stood by the window, staring outside. "Why?" I asked bluntly. "Why did you use me like that?" "I didn't plan it from the beginning." He turned around slowly. "When your father passed away, I only wanted to help you and Grace. But then I learned about the trust fund. And I gave in to temptation," he shrugged. "At first, I thought it would be temporary. I meant to borrow just a little and pay it back later. But as time passed—" 14 years? I said in disbelief. "You lied for 14 years?" "It became a habit," he said in a tired voice. "And I couldn't stop. There was also fear that you'd become such a good accountant, you'd discover the truth someday." "What about my mother?" "She didn't know at first," Edwin admitted. "But a few years later, she started asking questions. By that time, we had already spent most of the money. She made a choice." His words pierced my heart. My mother had made a choice. And she chose Edwin, not me. Before I left the room, I turned back. "You weren't my father. But I'll never forget that you were there for us during a difficult time. That part was real." After I signed the papers and stepped out of the office, the rain had stopped. A rainbow stretched across the sky, light breaking through the darkness. "It's over now," Thomas said, holding my hand. "No," I smiled. "This is a new beginning." A week after the settlement, my mother came to visit my apartment. She looked exhausted, her usual confident presence gone. "May I come in?" she asked hesitantly. I led her into the living room. The silence between us was heavy with years of trust and secrets. "Why?" I finally asked. "Why did you stay silent?" "At first, I really didn't know," my mother began softly. "Edwin was the one who saved us after your father died. When he didn't mention the trust fund, I didn't question it. And years later, when I realized the truth—" "By then it was already too late," I said bitterly. "I'm not trying to make excuses," my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. "I was weak. I depended too much on my love for Edwin and the stability he provided. And as time went on, it became harder and harder to tell the truth." "You knew," I said. "When I was struggling in college, when I was saving for my wedding. You knew." My mother nodded silently. "I know it's unforgivable." "What will happen with Edwin?" I asked, staring out the window. "We're separated," my mother said. "After the settlement, he changed. He's torn between anger and regret. He says he still loves you, but at the same time, he tries to justify what he did." I gave a bitter smile. Typical. "Elsa," my mother tried to take my hand. I pulled away slightly. "Is there any way we can rebuild our relationship?" "It'll take time," I answered honestly. "Once trust is broken, it's hard to get it back." "I'll wait," she said. "No matter how long it takes." After she left, I looked through my father's old photo album. Familiar smiles, family vacations, and moments I had nearly forgotten. As I turned the pages, I came across a photo I hadn't noticed before. It was of my father, a younger Grace, and a group of their friends. Among them was Edwin. They were all young and full of hope. As I stared at the photo, my Aunt Liz called. "Elsa, I'm thinking of gathering some of your father's old friends," she said. "They really want to see you." After my father's death, I had lost touch with most of these people. Edwin had skillfully drawn us into his own circle and gradually distanced us from my father's network. "That sounds nice," I replied. For the first time in a while, I felt a sense of lightness. The following Saturday, Liz hosted a small gathering at her home. There were my father's old friends and colleagues, and people who had known both my parents since their university days. They welcomed me warmly and filled the room with memories of my father. "Your father was an incredible man," said Gail Miller, an old colleague of his. "He always talked about you. He used to say, 'Elsa is something special.' After he passed away, we tried to reach out to you," another friend added. "But Edwin told us Elsa and Grace need to start a new life, and kept us away." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Edwin had deliberately cut me off from my father's memories and connections, drawing me under his own influence. "But now, you've come back," Gail Miller said with a smile. "And we have a lot to talk about." At the end of the gathering, Gail approached me. "This is something your father entrusted to me," he said, handing me a small box. He told me, "When Elsa grows up, please give this to her." Inside the box was my father's pocket watch and a small notebook. The notebook was filled with his thoughts, hopes, and love for me. I never knew he had kept a journal. "He was so proud of you," Gail said quietly. "And if he saw how you've risen now, he'd be even prouder." On the way home, I cried in the car. Not just from the pain of loss and betrayal, but from the release that came with newly discovered connections and understanding. The next day, Thomas and I were walking through a park. The autumn wind passed through the trees, and colorful leaves danced around us. "What do you think?" Thomas asked. "About yesterday's gathering?" "It felt like finding a lost family," I replied. "Through them, I feel like I got to know my father better." "And your mother?" "It'll take time," I sighed. "She made the wrong choice. But I'm not ready to throw away our entire relationship. At least not yet." Thomas took my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll be here with you." I was grateful for those words. Amid all the chaos and betrayal, Thomas's love and support had been my anchor. 1 year after the settlement, I stood at my father's grave on a quiet winter morning. Snow was gently falling, covering the headstone in a white blanket. Beside me stood Aunt Liz, her warm hand resting on my shoulder. "He would be proud of who you are today," Aunt Liz said softly. My life had changed completely over the past year. With the recovered trust fund and repayment from my stepfather, I had opened my own accounting firm, a dream I'd had since childhood. It was small, but it embodied my personal vision. My specialty was family trusts and estate planning, a natural choice born from my own experience. "Do you think so?" I asked. "Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing." He supported us during hard times, after all. Edwin had complied with the settlement. He sold the luxurious house and moved into a more modest home. He remained separated from my mother, and their marriage seemed to be nearing its end. "Your father was always a man who valued justice and fairness," Aunt Liz said, taking my hand. "Choosing not to send Edwin to prison was an act of mercy, but holding him accountable was the right thing to do. The biggest change wasn't financial, it was internal. My understanding of trust, values, and family had fundamentally shifted. As my therapist Marcus once said, I now had the skill of setting boundaries, a concept that had once been foreign to me, but had since become central to my everyday life. But the most precious change of all was the new connections I had formed with those who had been part of my father's life. Your father was my mentor," said the gray-haired man, Gail Miller. "He always said, integrity is the foundation of everything. And he always carried family photos," another woman added. "Especially yours. He was always so proud of you." The process of rebuilding my relationship with my mother had begun slowly. At first, short phone calls. Then a tense lunch. Gradually, we were beginning to form a new kind of relationship. It was hard to understand her choices with Edwin, but I had to acknowledge that she was now trying to make amends. "Your father was such a kind man," she said one day, flipping through a shared photo album. "Even during hard times, he never gave up hope." Why were he and Edwin friends? I asked a question I had always wondered. They seemed so different. "They were different when they were young," my mother explained. "Edwin was ambitious, but he was honest. After your father got sick, he changed. His desire for power and control grew stronger." "And yet you chose him?" I said quietly. "The greatest mistake of my life," my mother sighed. "But I won't run from that mistake. I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild my relationship with you," she said. Finally, Gail came up to me. He pulled a small envelope from his coat pocket. "This is something your father gave me," he said quietly. "He told me one day she might need it. And I think that day is now." Inside the envelope was an old photograph and a short letter. The photo showed my parents and a young me. The letter was in my father's handwriting. To Elsa, "Life is often unfair, and it doesn't always go as we plan. But never forget you are strong, you are wise, and most of all, you are loved. No matter how winding the path may be, if you stay true to yourself, you will always find your way to the right place. With love, Dad." Tears streamed down my cheeks. It was as if he had foreseen the future and left these words for this very moment. "Did he know?" I asked Gail. "About Edwin?" "He suspected," Gail replied quietly. "That's why he put several safeguards in place. He gave copies of the trust documents to a few people and left this letter. He was a cautious man." On the way home that day, I held my father's final message close to my heart and read it again and again. "No matter how winding the path may be, if you stay true to yourself, you will always find your way to the right place." He wasn't wrong.